Hey everyone, it's Dave. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to talk to you for a second about, some of the business that we do here at the start of episodes. I just wanted to remind you guys that on top of doing these podcasts, I'm also a writer. I write screenplays and I write books. Well, we'll say book, because right now it's not plural yet. I have written a book called Shadow Killer. It's a novella. It's a short book. You can read it pretty quickly. It takes place in the world of Hugh Howey's Wool, his Silo Saga books. And that's available on Amazon.com for Kindle. And if you're looking for a way to support what I do here, let me tell you something. Seeing reviews on that book, seeing those sales come in when they do, that really is something that gets me pretty happy about what I do. So if I could encourage you to take a look at that, that would be awesome. Also, there's a short film that I wrote that Brian Campbell directed that's up on Amazon. It's called Big Boy. It's 4 minutes long. Once again, if you have Amazon Prime, it's free. Definitely check that out. I'm very happy with the way that turned out. That was the one that we were able to go to Tribeca with in 2015 and have the premiere there in one of their shorts blocks. So I've got links to all that stuff on the nobodiesknows.com website. If you go to the page for this podcast episode and scroll down, you'll see all kinds of links. If you go all the way to the bottom of the page, you'll also see links for people who have supported the show or helped me out with these various projects. We've got Briar's music for Polymorph and the other stuff that he does that's on there. Please go check that stuff out. I think it's very cool, and I'm honored to be able to use that music for the intro and outro music for this podcast. Okay, I think that's everything I needed to tell you about. Let's get started.
Here we go.
Welcome back to I've Known You Too Long. It's Dave. I'm back with another episode. Today I have someone who actually I've been waiting to have them on the show because I wanted them to hit an artificial milestone that I had created around this podcast before they were allowed to come on the show. I wanted them on the whole time, but rules are rules, and I had to do it this way. This is someone who you might know from his band Gunmen and Flight Paths. No? Maybe you know him as your running coach. No? Maybe you know him as the singer from The Helm, or as I know him, my prior roommate and my co-host on the little-known, never-aired, and not real Drive Time morning show, Dave and Bob in the Morning. He is also the only person who has the distinction of being recorded in the podcast studio that was once his bedroom, Bob Swift. Welcome, Bob.
Ha ha!
I knew you said you were going to do that.
I realized it about, I would say about, I don't know, like 5 minutes ago when we were getting set up. I'm in my old bedroom.
This is, yes.
Which
almost,
is now.
Almost every episode of this podcast has been recorded in this room except for the road versions. And you used to sleep right there.
Yeah.
Right where I'm pointing.
This truly is the place where magic continues to happen.
Magic happens in this room, I guess. I am only aware of the post-2015 magic and the hints of magic I would hear sometimes through the walls.
Did you ever watch Cribs, like that show?
Yeah.
TV Cribs. Anytime anybody walked into their bedroom, like during that, they were like, "This is where the magic happens." And it was like, okay, so what are you talking? Sleight of hand? Are you talking like
card tricks?
Prop magic?
Did no one ever do that? Did no one ever put on a funny hat? And
pull out a fucking dove?
That would have been awesome. No, the best Cribs was Wu-Tang.
Oh, the Red Man one, where he had just the shoe box of cash on top of his fridge. He's like, this is just my money.
Weren't they also playing Nintendo?
Yeah, there was that.
Awesome.
And then there was that guy who was like the Headbangers Ball host for a while.
Ricky Rackman?
No, he was like the latter era one, like Matt something.
Pinfield.
No, but he was like this stout, bald white guy.
Pinfield.
No, it wasn't Pinfield. I know what Pinfield looks like, and it was a
stout,
younger dude,
bald white guy.
There were more than just one.
Jamie
of those.
Josta.
No.
But aren't all of these names correct? I think Pinfield did like 120 minutes or something.
Yeah, he did 120 minutes.
Yeah.
But this dude, he's like showing people his house, and he walks to his, like, he's got this really extensive figurine collection, because like everyone was collecting figurines like Spawn shit.
Oh yeah, like McFarlane toys.
Yeah, and he had the McFarlane or some sort of other brand Metallica figures, but he didn't have Lars. And he pointed out he did that on purpose. And I just thought that was a wonderful touch.
Nice.
But
Dude from Newfound Glory, the guitar player, showed his Gorilla Biscuits on purple.
Yeah, I remember
that
that too.
Really appreciated that. It actually upped my opinion of that band just slightly.
Yeah, just slightly.
It's like, yeah, you put that on MTV. That was kind of, yeah. Only because only a few people watching this are going to actually understand the significance.
Yeah. By the way, I am stoked to be on this podcast. I am a fan of this podcast. I can't say that I've listened to every episode, but I've listened to most.
What kind of fan are you?
And I don't know what that means.
You're supposed to say oscillating.
Oscillating? Oh.
No, I didn't. With you, I don't know.
Ventilation.
You're a ventilation fan?
Yeah.
Okay. Fucking fan. So,
but I would just got to say that one of the great strengths of this podcast is...
What are you trying to do here?
I'm just trying to talk about my former roommate who was a fantastic human. One of the great strengths of this podcast is that you are such a great conversationalist that like you can just tell that like this is kind of one of the myriad things that you are destined to have done, right? Is there a format where somebody can talk in a fantastically awesome way to other people and just share those conversations? Yes, there's podcasts. And of course, Dave Larson would have a podcast. And of course, it would be awesome. So I'm stoked.
Wow. Yeah. So I'll have your check.
Yeah, my representatives.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay. So speaking of format, we need to get to the format.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
by the way, it was very nice of you to say I may cut it out. So if people don't know what we're talking about, it's because I cut out all the nice things you said because don't.
You could do all that stuff that people used to do before they could digitally sample and like cut tape to make people like the band Crass had Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan having a phone call, and they had just taken all these media samples of them and cut them together. And so do that.
Just change what you're saying?
Yes.
No, so we have to stick with the format, Bob. So the format is, Bob, I've known you too long.
I felt that every day I lived with you.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Now, unlike other people who have been on this podcast, like many of them, I haven't actually known you as long.
No, I feel like the youngin'.
Because the rule was 15 years when I started this. I had to know someone for 15 years before I would put them on the show.
It's been about 16 now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so I don't remember the exact day and moment we met, but I have this feeling that it was at the Paradox in the U District.
Yeah, I can tell you when I thought I met you.
Okay, that's what we do.
So
when was our first meeting? So in case anyone is only listening to this episode of the podcast, because Bob's on, which is awesome. On this podcast, I figure out when I met somebody. We go back and talk about their lives and what it was that led them down a path where they would eventually run into me. And then we talk about their life from that point forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad there's structure here because you've had many a conversation with me where I've just like tried to add all the context in the world to everything that I say. Also, when you said go back, I just immediately had Huey Lewis in the News Back in Time in my head. So there's a soundtrack running just because that's the way my brain works, but we can talk about that later.
You can go ahead and note all of the song changes in the playlist in your head as we go through.
I already have had like 3 throughout this, and I can't remember the first 2, but the third was Huey Lewis Back in Time. And maybe I'll just keep doing that, keep a running list. But I came to visit Seattle in 2001. The border was closed because it was, of all months, September.
The border to Seattle?
No. So we can talk more about my past, but I'm half Canadian. And so I came out here to check out this city, potentially to move here one day. And then also to go visit family. And I had slated 2 weeks for that. And my family that I wanted to visit, besides my mom, who lived in Tacoma at the time, was Canadian. So I was going to cross the border. One thing I didn't have was a passport because I never needed one to cross the border before. And I have a Canadian birth certificate. So that makes me like not necessarily at first glance an American according to the people at the border. So after the tragic events of September 11th, the border was closed like immediately. And they got super intense about passports and documentation. And I'd almost been detained once before when I went on a bus, and I was going to go on a bus this time. So I was like, okay, I can't go. So I spent 2 weeks in the city, and then I went to a couple shows. And the Paradox, I went to 2 shows there. I saw Minus the Bear with the Rapture.
All right.
And I was way into that kind of like, I don't know what kind of indie-ish rock at the time. And then...
And that was an offshoot of your raver past?
No. And that
Oh,
has
we'll
nothing
get
to
to
do-
that.
We'll get to that. I'm sure that files will be pulled. But no, I went to see Countervail at the Paradox.
Oh, I certainly saw Countervail at the Paradox.
And I'd never seen this band before. They played a good show.
And this was on your trip out?
This was on my trip out.
Oh, we totally met at that show.
Yeah. And I knew you from the fact that in every Maximum Rock and Roll I'd ever looked at, there was an Excursion Records ad. And there was...
Then,
yeah. And then I had At Both Ends and a number of other things that were at least adjacent to the scene and everything as far as in my CD collection. And
so you had a number of releases from my record label.
At least one or two. I mean, besides At Both Ends, but like nothing like super like deep cut like 1007 or anything like that. That was I consider that more.
I was just clarifying it just in case someone was listening that didn't know what you were talking about.
Oh yeah, so Dave Larson for years ran a record label known as Excursion Records.
Good voice.
Yeah. Ha ha. So yeah, no, I saw an Excursion table and I was like, this is pretty cool because I knew they were from Seattle, and then I met you there. I'm sure I probably said something like, I've seen your ads in Maximum Rock and Roll.
Wait, so I was actually selling stuff at a merch table?
Maybe. I think it had to be. Yeah. And I remember going to another show. Like,
who else played the Countervail show?
Yeah, that's the thing. I can't really remember. There's only two people I remember meeting at that show that like I met. Well, I didn't meet the other one. I just knew I saw her, and that was someone who ended up being my, dating me for a while after I moved here. But like, I remember seeing her and meeting you.
Okay, hold on a second.
Yep.
I'm going to see if I can figure this out. Because I agree. We met at the Countervail show at the Excursion merch table in 2001 or early 2002.
It was late 2001. It was September, probably my birthday was on the 25th. So it was probably late September, early October. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who cannot see the video feed, which is non-existent, Dave is typing. He is reading some words.
Hold on. We're almost there.
We're almost
pulling up an old stranger.com calendar.
No fooling. All ages action.
Unfortunately, it was not Botch, the Blood Brothers, and Teen Cthulhu.
No, and that was at the Redmond Firehouse, right? Was that supposed to be?
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to that show, but Botch had to cancel. I was so stoked to see Botch. They were one of my favorite bands. And they had to cancel, and Himsa played instead. And John Pettibone was singing for them at the time. So
we met
okay
on Saturday, September 29th at the Paradox Theater in the University District.
Who else played?
It was Countervail, Himsa, and the Entropy Project.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, no, that was the show. Yeah. We pinpointed the date.
We did. Wow, we could pinpoint it. It was probably sometime between 7 and 9.
Yeah. It was 8:53 p.m. I was slightly hungry. I hadn't eaten in a while. And I was thinking to myself, man, what a piece of work is man. Yeah, I don't know. I digress. There'll be lots of digressions.
I think you may have to come over when I start my improv podcast.
That's fine.
Which it will be terrible.
Yeah.
I'm fully thinking I'm going to make a bad improv podcast that are just fake situations.
Yeah.
But you'll have to be one of my guys.
One of the things that I know about improv is that you have to like accept whatever circumstances are put in front of you.
Yes, and.
But the problem is I'm like you'd also probably have to be strong at making those circumstances up. And I'm not good at any of that. Like being spontaneously like creative is really difficult for me. I could be just like, if I'm like looking at it as being creative. Does that make sense?
Are you able to have conversations?
Barely. Have you talked to anybody who knows me? These are usually excruciating.
Well, what we're trying to tell people is you lived with me for a number of years.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Let's merge back onto the road that we were on, sir.
See, that's what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
Like, a conversation is like improv.
Yeah, that's true.
There are probably people that are so pissed at me right now for trashing their art form. So what's the deal?
Wayne Brady is going to come knocking at your door.
Wayne Brady?
Or who's Colin? I'm just thinking, whose line is it anyway?
You're just throwing a bunch of... was Wayne Brady on Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Fuck yeah, he was.
I
He was
didn't watch
great.
that show.
Oh,
I like it.
Okay, never mind. I think it was on...
I liked him on Chappelle.
Yeah, that was great too. That was the part of my life where I lived here, where we were watching Chappelle all the time. Okay, so let's
No, not here.
not some here, mostly over at the old bro zone. Right? Yeah. Okay.
Old bro zone. Okay.
So what
Then you
should
left. Then you left.
because
You went back to Syracuse.
Oh yeah, so 2001 I left. It was pretty great. Like I enjoyed the time here, and I didn't know at the time that the fall, like the sort of mid to late autumn, is the best time to be alive in Seattle. The weather is fucking fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And there's this fucking ginormous mountain that's like everywhere you look. Everything like sort of, if you look in that direction, you can't escape this mountain.
You describing Mount Rainier?
And yeah, but I came from a place with no like interesting topography, you know. We had what are called drumlins.
It's a little hilly there, isn't it?
Yeah, there's drumlins, and those are glaciers left them behind.
Drumlins?
Drumlins, yeah. But I mean,
are they like alluvial fans, but on the on the land and not at the mouths of rivers?
So the mountains out there are much, much older, and like
really?
Well, they're much older, and then
the mountains where I'm from are much older.
They're not.
What a weird brag, Bob.
I wasn't brag. I knew there would be a lot of this in the podcast too. So, either way, I'm from Syracuse, New York at the time, and I fly back home, and I had talked to my mom, who had offered me a place to stay while I was getting on my feet if I ever moved out here. I said, hey, in a year, I think it would be good for me to move out here. And she's like, cool, yeah, I got a guest room. You can get on your feet. And then I was like, cool. So I flew back to Syracuse, and it was freezing rain when I landed. And I called my mom. I said, hey, I'll see you in 6 months. And 6 months later, I was out here. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the story.
So I had moved into that September when you met me, I had just moved into a new house.
Yes.
Where I was living with Carrie Whitney.
Ha ha! You, sir, are correct.
And Jamond Ferguson.
Ha ha! Can I just Ed McMahon the rest of this?
No. So where did you live when you...
Ha ha! That is right. Oh, there's a lot of red.
You're putting a lot of red. You got a lot of red in your ledger.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, where are we traveling back in time, like Huey Lewis, or am I just?
Yeah. We're gonna put the pin in the moving out.
Okay.
I'm just getting in my head.
Now I've
where
got moving
I
out
was.
by Billy Joel in my head.
Good.
Okay. Bosom
cool.
Buddies.
Oh, that is right.
Yeah.
I always.
But he didn't sing it. It was like someone else singing it.
I always mix that up with Stepping Out.
Oh yeah, by Joe.
It's good. It's a good song.
Yeah, no, it's a great song. That's one of my favorite songs from 1983.
I forgot that you did a year by year musical assessment at one point where you listened to all the hit songs from the different years.
Well, yeah, it's the background music of when I work. It's just like stuff I don't have to think about too much.
But you needed to put a theme to it.
Yeah. No, I did 1982. That was the year.
I thought you did all the 80s.
No, I couldn't do all the 80s. I did 82 albums from 1982.
Oh, okay. What was the best one?
Oh man, it was probably the Talk Talk album.
Oh shit.
Yeah, that was really good.
There was Police in there too, right?
Yeah, I know. Actually, was there Police? Yeah, they did Synchronicity was the year after that. I can't remember if there was a Police. There was some stuff that was really easy to listen to, and then there was some stuff that was like, oh, I'm really just...
And you listened to the entire albums?
Yeah, the entire albums.
82 albums from 1982.
Yeah, and then I tried to do 94 from 1994. No, I tried to do 92 from 1992, and En Vogue was a strong one. Just gonna put that out there. But I don't remember if I got all the way through that, because then I just was like, I want to listen to something else right now. So I mean, I had streaming music and a workplace that allowed me to just put on headphones all day, so I could do that. So
all right,
yeah, that was like 4 years ago. Wow,
4 really?
No, probably more like 6. So do I go back in time from here?
No, I'll take you.
Okay, take me back in time, Dave.
You're back to Huey Lewis, I'm assuming.
No, I was more like focused on the take me back, so I was like, maybe Eddie Money's I Want to Go Back.
Oh, but you can't go back, So, Bob, what we do on this podcast is I take you back and we figure out what your deal is.
Mm-hmm.
And I figure out the things about you that make you you.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone I've met for the most part in this podcast, I know them through the music scene, hardcore punk rock music, and people people come from strange circumstances and have a similar, a lot of similar situations. I think is interesting to compare and contrast.
That's one of the things fascinating about this podcast. I'm like, oh, I had a similar experience,
Oh, let's talk about it then.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
I was born in a small hamlet in, I don't know if it's actually a city on the coast, the Sunshine Coast of British Columbia. It's about, if you were to drive in a straight line, it would probably be about 2 or 3 hours from Vancouver. This town's called Powell River, but there's like the coast is all like jankety and filled with fjords. And
so just so we're clear, what's the Sunshine Coast?
The Sunshine Coast is like the sort of like promotional name for that part of the coast of British Columbia.
Okay.
The Sunshine Coast, come see the stuff. Come out to the town. We'll have a couple of beers. I don't know, so what is it? I'm getting Bruce Willis, Die Hard here. So I was born on the Sunshine Coast, but I didn't live there. My grandparents lived there, and my mom had moved up there for a little bit, and I think my dad was in the military.
Wait, so you were a Canadian anchor baby?
Yes. No, my grandparents were Canadian. My mom just moved into their house for a little bit.
To have the baby?
No, she was probably in between different places we were moving when my dad was in the military, and that seemed like a good place to stay for a while.
She was American, right?
I don't have the full story. I was not yet conscious.
Were you born in Kenya?
My mom was Canadian. She's since become a naturalized citizen, and no, but my birth certificate does say that I was born in a different country. But since I'm white, nobody would care as far as those people that care about the Obama birth certificate.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
Because I look like them, which is.
Oh, are you implying that those people are racists?
I would. What, Dave? Yes, I am implying that people who ask for Obama's birth certificate are racist.
I don't imply.
Yeah.
I flat out state it.
Yes. Yeah. So
they are racist.
So I was born in Powell River. My dad was in the Air Force. We moved around a bit. I lived in West Germany at one point, back when it was West Germany, which was cool.
You did?
Yeah.
Did you look over the wall?
No, that's Berlin. So that's actually.
Well, is Berlin part of West Germany?
It was.
I mean, I'm being corrected like I'm a fucking child here.
No. You're right. It's politically part of West Germany, but it was actually nestled within the geographic boundaries of East Germany.
Which is why they had to do the...
they put a wall around it.
They put a wall around it. Yeah. I know from the Sex Pistols song. And because that's where I got my history. And they also did an airplane. They lifted... There was a Berlin airlift.
Yes.
Where they brought in everything that people needed for a long time, right?
A couple months or a couple weeks or something. And that was...
Was it months or weeks, do you think?
I can't remember, but it was during the late 50s or early 50s. It was when the Cold War was heating up.
So
tonight on Magnum, the Cold War heats up with a Berlin airlift.
What I'm wondering is, it must have been strange to bring supplies into a place by air at that time. So did it just cease to be the Berlin airlift when people were just like, yeah, this is a pretty efficient way to get things to places, and then everyone just started doing it all over the place?
The Berlin resupply. The Berlin, this is how we do things most of the time now.
The Berlin UPS plane.
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, there are 3 road corridors in and out of Berlin.
Oh, they negotiated a...
And so, in the end...
So you weren't in Berlin.
Those reopened.
Okay.
There was this great movie I saw as a kid called Gotcha with Anthony Edwards.
Yeah. Paintball gun.
Yeah. And maybe it wasn't as great as I remember it.
No.
But I saw it a couple years ago, and I still enjoyed what I enjoyed about it as a kid. It was one of
because you was a kid and there was sex in it.
Well, but there was also it's like spy intrigue and comedy.
But there was wasn't there a hot East German agent or something?
She was supposed to be Czech, and her name was Sasha Beneček.
Sasha Beneček.
But the spoiler alert, and the word spoiler is very difficult for me to say. Spoiler alert. Only when I say alert afterwards, I can say spoiler. But if I say spoiler alert, I have to really work on enunciating it. So spoiler alert.
You just don't mash your words together the way I do?
You are a slurred mass of just...
I am most of the time.
Yeah. So, spoiler alert, she was actually a deep cover American agent. You find out at the end of the movie.
Oh, I feel like that got ripped off for a recent film that came out that was quite good. Spoiler alert, Atomic Blonde.
Oh, yeah, that was good too. Yeah, man, it
was a really good movie.
She beats the crap out of people.
I have to say, it didn't get the hype I thought it deserved. I thought that was a great movie.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun. For fans of... what's that? John Wick, because it's the same fight choreography.
Yeah, and it's a interesting. I didn't know. I couldn't tell from the trailers when they were advertising it that it was a period piece, that it took place
Yeah.
before the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah, it was more stylistically a period piece than it was like, like they went through and like leafed through all these things to be very accurate. But yeah, the Americans just finished on FX.
Yeah, I feel like people didn't even know how to fight that way back then.
Yeah, no, they probably
They
didn't.
just added, like, we've already had the UFC.
Yeah.
We know everyone needs to know Thai kickboxing and
Somewhere in central Brazil,
and jiu-jitsu.
They were formalizing all that stuff, and a couple people in LA were like beating the crap out of people in order to like say, hey, this is our stuff. But the Americans just finished on FX.
Watched a little bit of the first season.
It's a good show, and the finale was like gut-wrenching, and that's a show that went like that's a show that kind of tried to get it right, especially more as it went on. Like a couple times during the early seasons, if you like looked up some details, you'd be like, that didn't happen,
Right.
But as the show went on, they tried to be more true to form, right? So I don't know.
Sometimes on shows like that, they'll be hearing a song on the radio,
And you'll be like,
and
no,
it won't feel right to me because I was alive at the time and I'll go check it out, and it's like, well, okay, so it happened in Stranger Things.
Yeah, that was a huge deal. Like
But the funny thing was, you could tell that they did a little bit of work because it's like, oh, there was a 7-inch single B-side of that song that was released in December of that year in an edition of 1,000 in the UK. His brother was really plugged in, maybe.
In Central Indiana.
It's not right.
It was like 2 weeks ago. I had the same conversation with some friends, and we were like, yeah, that just doesn't work.
It's just technically, yes, it was that year, but sometimes, it took a long time for those songs to get around.
No, so
whatever. I like Stranger Things.
Yeah, I mean, I dug the first season, never saw the second.
Didn't dig it that much, then.
Well, I guess that's just that's.
What, are you gonna tell me you had a kid and you were busy or something?
Yes.
Okay. That's true.
For some reason, right now, just so we're keeping track, "Just the Way You Are," Billy Joel, in my head right now. Yeah, don't know why, but
I feel like it's commentary on me, so fuck you.
Well, it means I love you just the way you are, Dave. I'm here to admit that.
Okay, that means despite what's happening.
Yes. So, I was born on the Sunshine Coast, moved around a bit, went to West Germany, but not West Berlin, and then I ended up at some point ended up in northern New York, and I lived with my grandparents for a couple of years. My mom returned to college. My dad was still stationed in a place where it was very difficult for him to have kids with him. So I lived with my dad's parents. And then he moved out to...
so you were a military brat.
Not really, because military brats, I see them as people who like can remember a lot of those times when they lived on bases and stuff. And I was done doing that at age 4. So then I was in upstate New York, north of the middle of the state. And then my dad moved to Syracuse, and he got a job and picked us up, and we lived with him in a suburb, and that's where I ended up for a while. And I lived there until 2001 or 2002.
Did you go to school in Germany, or were you a little kid?
My sister did a year of kindergarten there, and I was too young. I went to school. I started in a town called Beaver Falls, New York.
But you remember being in Germany?
I do. There was a couple of things that I remember. There's 3 memories that I have. All are pretty fascinating. 1, I fell off a slide and had to go to the emergency room.
Real fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's fascinating to me because as a kid, my daughter's now about the same age that I was when I started really remembering things. So I'm like, is she going to remember that I just, said this stupid thing? And usually the answer to that is yes. But Dad, you said this yesterday. No. But the other thing is,
there were 2 other things.
My dad 2 other things. My dad loved old castles and battlefields and stuff. So we went to a couple of those. We went to one castle where they had like this place where you could go and see where the dungeon used to be. Mm-hmm. And there was not a door that closed or anything, but my dad got on one side of like a barred wall, and we were on the other side. He said, I just locked you in. And we were both, I have 2 sisters. We were all like, freaking out.
Even though the door was clearly open.
Yeah, but I was less than 4 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then the other place we went was the battlefield at Verdun, which was a huge, like tragic, like loss of life during World War I. Over 1 million people died there. And there's a place called the Bone House where it's, maybe it's called that. I forget. There's a building where underneath they have piles of bones of unidentified people, horses, things like that from this battle that were just,
They just pile them up.
They just put them in this building. And there was also some like building with like the names of all these people who died there or were missing or things like that. I don't know.
You remembered all that from being 4.
Well, it's pretty fucking intense, you know, like to see like remains of people. I challenge
They
anyone.
piled that building full of dead bodies and they rotted away and left the bones. It's called the Bone House. Anyway, Bobby, want to get an ice cream? That's the kind of thing that will ruin you for life.
Yeah, I challenge anyone at that age to see human remains of some sort, or the band Human Remains, and not remember it. So yeah, and then I was in Syracuse, and Syracuse, yeah, I could talk a lot about that stuff, but I want to make sure I don't digress too far, because digressing is actually the thing I do. So
I can edit.
Okay.
I'm going to cut out like 2 hours of what we've already done.
Yes. We're here on hour 5 of this podcast. We're both like super hoarse. So, what? I can't even fake being hoarse. So, okay. So, yeah, what's next?
I think they make a noise like you have to like, I can't do a horse noise either. You need to coconuts together and then do it like. There we go.
Yes, that's being a horse. So I went to high school with this kid who had like 2 really amazing talents. He could play drums like no one else. Neil Peart was like his favorite drummer. Like, loved Rush, you know.
So this guy was insufferable.
No, he's actually a super nice guy.
Okay.
He wasn't like your typical like Greg Bennick Rush fan.
Wow.
And
wow.
I'm just kidding. No, I'm just gonna try to throw digs at everyone, but no. That man, his main pastime in life, besides helping others and being in bands and whatnot,
Who, Greg?
is drawing pictures of him killing you.
Yeah, that's been talked about.
Okay.
So here, there's a picture on one of the web page,
yeah.
Nobody's Knows podcast pages of him.
Well,
killing me.
This isn't news to you, but so as your friend, I'm defending you by bagging on him.
Defending me against Greg?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay.
He was the first episode of this podcast.
No defense needed, my friend. That guy's as soft as a loose stool.
He juggles a lot of different things in his life.
Oh, he ha ha. I don't know what to.
So,
Okay.
Bob, where did you go to school? Did you go to preschool or right into kindergarten?
I went into kindergarten, and my birthday is in September,
Now,
so I was 4 when I started.
Did you know from living in Germany that was a German word?
No, but my sister
Is it a
probably
German
did.
word?
My sister, bless her soul, my older sister, I have 2 sisters, 4 years apart on the same day. So, and I was almost right in the middle of them age-wise. My older sister learned some stuff in kindergarten. She learned to count to 10 in German. That's one of the things she lorded over us for like the majority of our youth. Because she just, it was probably a wonderful, unique experience for her. But
at some point, you could have figured out how to do that.
yeah, we did. And the word for 6 is sex. So as kids, you're like,
I get to say something bad.
yeah. So I went to an elementary school in northern New York, and then when we moved to Syracuse, I moved to another one, and that building is still around, and it's like a office building now. Which
care
is weird.
about the building.
Okay, I'm all full of superfluous details. So you know that once when I was on tour, the band I was on tour with named me, my spirit animal was a storytelling panda. Because we were all, it was like late at night. We're like, "What's your spirit animal?" Because like they were listening to Coast, and someone was talking about their spirit animal.
Yeah,
and it's fucking like 1 a.m. in the middle of Montana, and they're like, "Bob's animal is a storytelling panda who never gets to the point."
Well, we'll try to find it in this podcast.
So
now hold on.
Okay,
you just sit there for a minute.
I'm sitting.
All right, you went to kindergarten in what was it, Beaver Falls?
Beaver Falls.
And did you finish out the year?
Yeah, I was there until 2nd grade.
Until 2nd grade.
Yeah.
Okay,
so my grandparents were raising me at the time. Yeah.
Your grandparents were raising you. You're going from kindergarten to 2nd grade in a grade school with a bunch of other kids that you know. These are the first kids that you're actually socializing with that you can remember.
Yep.
What was it like?
It was weird and fun because the school was also like a K through 12 because it was such a rural area.
Oh.
The rural juror. There was a rural area, so like they bussed in kids from like 45 minutes away, and there were like, if they were taking us to the gym or like there's some shared parts of the building that all grades used, you would run into like seniors in high school.
Oh, wow.
Which is fucking wild when you think about the fact that this was like 1982 and those people were like, 20 years old at that point. Like that, just the age gap there was kind of wild. But
no, they weren't 20 years old when
Well,
they were
but I'm
seniors.
sorry. Yeah, they're sorry. 18 years old.
Okay.
Well, it was a rural district. You never know.
Yeah, they might have been.
Lots of lead paint out there. So, no. But yeah, so these people are like, 18 years old, and I'm, so they
You can round up.
They have 13 years on me. So that's crazy. They're born in the 60s. That's just wild. So,
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember that also there was just all this area to just go run around in the woods. And I did a lot of that. And,
Sure.
And there was Jerry and Travis and a bunch of kids that I still like remember that are probably all like, approaching 40 or past 40 and stuff.
This is interesting to me though, because I always want to know when a person gets moved out of their original socializing situation, what kind of effect that has.
I think
then you got uprooted and put somewhere else in the 3rd grade or the 2nd grade?
I was midway through the 2nd grade, and then I got uprooted again. Not really too uprooted because we just moved to a neighboring suburb when I was in 8th grade.
So you had to go to another new school?
Yeah, so I moved schools in 2nd grade and in 8th grade. So when I was friends with those kids in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, they were kids, like also kids that lived next door to me, or kids that there was a plot of land probably about a quarter mile from back of my house, because there wasn't a grid of streets in this town. So
right.
There was a couple streets, and then some people had like, stuff they had long driveways for, if you will. And the Eatons lived behind us, and the Zayers lived a street over, and there was a couple families that had like, they were deep in this town. They were just like, everyone had like one of 5 last names or something, right? But
right, it was like a rural hick kind of place.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't like to.
The Eatons were a cannibal family.
No. They were actually really nice. There was a really
they had to lure
overly creepy family next door, in the sense that the kids were great, but the parents were like, please come to our church.
Oh.
Please come to our church. And they were like that every like once in a while. And the kids, like, we were like famous friends with them, but their parents finally, my grandparents took us to church every Sunday. And they were as church going as you get to be, and still be really kind of chill about it. But them accepting this sort of structure of church and regular visits there, when we finally took that family up on the offer to go to their church, they were like, you really did that? You don't need to do that. Their church is a creepy church. And I was like, whoa.
Your grandparents were like, no, stay away from that church.
Yeah,
what was it?
I can't remember. But like, I mean.
Were they holy rollers? Were they snake handlers?
No, that would have been awesome.
Yeah.
That would be a memory, right?
Yeah.
I saw snake handlers. No, no, when I got uprooted, it was weird because there was all these like friends that I had that that I didn't really think that I made. When you make friends at like that age, like there's people I know that went to the same school district for their entire life, like school life, and they have these friends that are like super, super like intensely like long-term friends. Yeah. I have nothing like that. However, when we moved, my aunt and uncle still lived up there, and occasionally during the summers we'd go up there, and my dad actually would sometimes bring us up there and let us stay up there for a couple weeks. And so I would occasionally check in with these friends. And I remember having this conversation with this friend of mine, Travis. It was a couple years after I'd moved, and it was the summer of 1987. And I remember this because the song that was playing was Def Leppard's Pour Some Sugar on Me, was the song of that summer for me. And then my secret favorite was actually Rocket off the same album.
Yep.
Because that whole album is fucking great.
Whatever.
But you differ on the late 80s, mid to late 80s.
I jump one back.
Not Led Zeppelin, Def Leppard.
I jump one back, Def Leppard.
Pyromania, yeah. No, you and Bill had an online discussion about this the other day, and I saw that. It's a good album, too. For me, the album that was sort of resonating at the time, because it was just so omnipresent, was that one. And it was everywhere. Like, I mean, you could not go to the beach. This town had a really cool beach because there was like a river with like a dam, and there was this like swimming hole that wasn't as gross as a swimming hole because the water actually flowed through it, right?
Yeah.
So I remember being on the beach and it would be playing. I remember being like MTV would be on, it would be playing. Like it was all over the place. So I remember it was like 87. I'm talking to Travis, and there's kids. We had just gone to the beach. We were walking back to our houses and or where I was staying, and I hadn't been up there in a while. And there was kids whose names I forgot.
Sure.
And he's like, he was fucking sharp as a tack. And he says to me, he's like, you know, it's because you've met way more people than any of us meet at this point. You live in a place with lots more people. So, of course, you're going to probably forget a few names as you meet other people.
How old is this kid now?
He's my age, right? So
yeah, but how old are you now?
11, maybe 10.
Yeah, that's really. You're right. That kid
was a sharp
really
observation.
Actually thinking.
Yeah. No, he was one of the smarter people I think I knew at the time, and he just was like, "Yeah, that's how it works." And he wasn't.
Was that the last time you saw him?
No, it would
like
have
if
been
he
crazy.
walked away from this scene in your head, would he fade away, and then you'd be like, 10 years later, he broke up a fight in an ice cream shop and was stabbed in the neck.
He was robbing a bank.
Oh,
Yeah,
no. I was doing the Stand By Me version.
Oh yeah, no, I get what you mean. But he was at a pie eating contest and he choked to death on blueberry pie. No.
Wait, I'm sorry if that's real.
Yeah. No, so the last time I saw him was in Syracuse. Like I was in high school, and he.
Oh, so he followed you?
No,
he was thinking about you a lot.
No, he was in town because his dad was running a road race, and I was running the same race, and he was just there. And I was like, dude, long time no see. And he's like, yeah. And we caught up for a bit. And then I went and ran a 10-mile race and couldn't find him afterwards. So, but yeah, that's the last time I saw Travis.
And in a way, you're still running.
From all of it. Why do I run? Why? So, yeah.
Wait, were you doing the, should I apologize? What's that?
So, that's what that puts me at. Yeah, the mid 80s. I'm in Syracuse.
No.
Well, yeah.
I mean, hold on.
Yeah.
That's quite. Did you fight when you were a little kid?
Not really. This is a question that comes up in your podcast a lot.
I like to know about if people get in fights.
So I was in a kind of a weird spot as a kid. Like when I moved to Liverpool, which was the next place I lived, it's a suburb of Syracuse. I had some friends there.
Did you have some friends that they refer to as the lads?
No. Yeah, there was John and Paul and no. So I kind of staked out my spot as kind of a nerd. Not on purpose, but over time I was interested in things that kind of gave me that thing, that sort of aura of like, yeah, that kid unironically loves to play Star Trek during recess, right?
By himself?
No, there was maybe one or two other kids that would, right?
Okay.
And the play structure would be the starship, and the planet surface would be there, and that kind of thing.
Go out and take readings with your tricorder?
Yeah, well, of course. But so when I did, like, I didn't have like the base of friends that I'd known for as many years, and a lot of these kids had known each other a few more years, and those first couple years are super formative.
Oh yeah.
And we just recently, Ryla, my daughter, is going to go to kindergarten next year, and we had to approach our landlord and say, we don't want to worry year to year if we're going to have to move. Let's do a multi-year lease because we don't want to pull this kid out of kindergarten. We have the luxury of being able to ask for that. I understand that that's not something that everyone has.
Yeah.
And we were able to do that. So,
cool.
But as a kid, yeah, I got wrenched from this one place, put in another, and my situation was a bit different because I didn't have the backstory with a lot of people. Like moving here, I didn't have like all the backstory between you and Bill or you and John or whatever. But so I just kind of became known as a nerd, a very bookish kid. I was always reading. And
what kind of stuff were you reading then?
Usually, and this is the thing, I never read like the things that everyone says that I should have read. Like, remember, you should have read Ethan Frome, or I don't know if that's just Catcher in the Rye, man. That was a book everyone loved as a kid. I was always
wait. Is that from? Hold on. Are you doing Gross Point Blank?
Are you
Gross Point Blank?
Are you still inflicting that Ethan Frome damage? Yeah. Yeah.
That's high school.
By the way, yes.
You're not high school yet.
So no, I wasn't reading like the classics of literature
or supervising their training.
Yeah, but I read mostly at the time I was reading. As a kid, I was way into serialized novels, right?
You're not going to not let me finish that quote.
What? Okay.
Strictly
Greco-Roman, all torso.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We could do a whole 2 hours about how much I love that movie.
We probably should.
Yeah. It was as if everyone had swelled.
You have to say it with her weird face where you can hear her cheeks when she talks.
I know. Man, what a fucking
It's
gem
as if
that movie is.
everyone had swelled.
That movie's 20 years old, so he would be going to his 30-year high school reunion. 32.
It actually doesn't. Watching it now, it doesn't look like he's going to a 10-year high school reunion. Those are definitely 20-year reunion people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I never went to my 10-year, but I did go to my 20-year.
Owning a Beamer dealership at 28.
Yeah. Oh man, he lived in Grosse Pointe. It's an affluent suburb.
No one's selling all those houses. I mean, it
Yeah,
just doesn't seem right.
No, that's totally
It's
fair.
a total 38. Everything that everyone does in that is 38.
But the people
old.
that wrote it and made it were that age.
Right.
So, but they didn't want to make it like they were graduating in 78 because the music and the culture was a bit different. Although I don't know, because
there are problems, because if you haven't moved on in 20 years, it's more problematic than
I don't know.
just gone for
Cusack is
10.
that age though. Like John Cusack, Joan maybe not. I don't know about her, but he was way into the Clash and he was way into all that music. Maybe he was
a lot of
little bit
things
older.
about work, but it just doesn't feel like a 10-year reunion.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so where was I? I was in a dark room. No, so it was.
How many lights were there?
There were 4 lights. There are 4 lights. Okay, so I was a bookish nerd, right?
You were a bookish nerd, but you weren't reading Ethan Frome. What were you reading?
I was reading mostly serialized novels. Like when I was
Xanth.
No. See, that's the thing. I wish I had done that. Right? Like, there's a lot of stuff.
Serialized novels.
Like, I was huge for like the first reading I did, like of longer books, chapter books. Hardy Boys. Read like all of
you were
those
reading
Hardy
mysteries.
I was reading Hardy Boys mysteries.
Encyclopedia Brown.
I read a whole bunch of that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. I read a lot of like choose your own adventure stuff.
Oh, nice.
And
did you do them correctly, or did you read all the outcomes?
Oh no! See, that's the thing.
Did you do a multiverse version?
No. I was always like following them correctly, because that's just kind of the kind of kid I was. Right.
Did you ever see the Dungeons and Dragons ones that they made? They only made 2 or 3 where you had to roll dice.
No, but that's fucking awesome.
It was cool.
Yeah.
I just played it without dice and just did what I wanted and pretended I always won the battles.
And that's what separates you and me. I mean, I did a little bit of role-playing gaming, but that was usually at lunchtime in school. I used to get the books out of the library to just look at all the crazy shit in them.
Your school library had Dungeons and Dragons
Public
books? Public library.
Yeah.
Had Dungeons and Dragons books.
Yeah.
The
like
artwork,
the monster books and stuff.
the artwork in the original Dungeons and Dragons hardcover books it feels life-changing.
Yeah,
it did to me.
It was fucking great. So,
high contrast pen and ink.
Yeah. So I just read lots of serialized stuff, and then I read history books. And then I'm the kind of person that, like, if I like a thing, I'll read it multiple times. I read lots of books multiple times, and then as I grew older, I started reading Star Trek novels, and their Pocket Books was making tons of those at the time, and so.
So how old are you now?
Oh, I mean, my like teens probably at that point. I read Star Trek novels.
You're really
for
wanting to
years.
get out of this grade school thing before I
No,
ask
no.
all the questions.
No, ask all the questions. I'm just going until you ask more questions.
Well, I was going to ask about girlfriends, but now you're telling me you're reading Star Trek books.
Yeah,
so I'll just jump right off of that.
That answers all those questions. Also, so you asked about fights, and
yeah.
And I never really got into any. I was a nerd, so like at the time, the caste system that exists in schools would require that I get bullied, but I wasn't like a dysfunctional nerd in the sense that like I could be social to some degree, more than your most bullied people, I think. And again, I was like a white kid, and so that like I looked like everyone else, right? So that was definitely like a thing. Like,
but white kids get bullied.
No, I know, but my name was pretty normal. Like, there's a lot of things about me that just made me like blend into the crowd, and so I didn't really get picked out a lot for that. And I was in classes with, like, after a while I got sorted into, like, advanced classes and stuff. Mm-hmm. So the group of kids I was with for most of my classes throughout a lot of this were just kids who were like me. And it was the ones who were a little more socially dysfunctional, who had other things that people could make fun of that got made fun of more, right?
Okay.
And so
add a limp to you and you're screwed.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like, I mean, I wasn't great at sports, but I at least tried to participate occasionally, right?
Right.
And that's not a knock on kids who didn't. That's just a knock on the way kids who bully people work, right? They find the thing to pick, and then they start picking it apart, right?
Sure, but we're talking about you back then when you wouldn't have thought of it that way.
And I wasn't aggressive to like others in any way, and I didn't really have a lot of disagreements with people because I didn't.
So you didn't get in any fights.
I didn't socialize unless I had to, right? And then, but when I did, I wasn't like totally.
Your real friends were in the pages of those books. It's
sad but true. Metallica's Sad but True. It's off the Black Album. Not a great song, but still decent. Okay. Where that makes 5 songs so far.
Oh, I'm sure it's more.
So but yeah, no fights, and I mean I had hella crushes on girls. But they
no follow through there?
Well, no, I followed through, and they followed through in telling me to stop being interested.
Oh,
Yeah. In sixth grade, I wrote a rap about. It was a poem for a poetry class, but it was a rap about. I could also make it into a rap. At the time, like when everyone was just like aping what they thought were the conventions of rap, you know, and it was like in every commercial, and even Rodney Dangerfield had a rap that he did, and so I was that awkward about it, but yeah, I definitely talked about my crush on Ruth.
Oh, what did you rhyme with Ruth?
Doof.
That doesn't rhyme with Ruth.
Yeah, but
also booth, dude.
Yeah, so
kissing booth.
Yeah, but that was just beyond my comprehension at the time. Yeah. Sleuth.
It's good words.
Sleuth is great. Yeah, I didn't have the chops that I couldn't spit fire like I can now.
There are 5 great rappers.
There are?
Dylon. Okay, never mind. Just deep cut that you're not part of.
Yeah, I guess not. Yeah, so I didn't get in many fights, and girls were not interested in me. I was very interested in them.
When did you start listening to music?
Music was omnipresent as a kid, but it was always
just use a word people know.
This is the second time I used omnipresent.
I know, and it made me mad the first time I didn't say anything, or maybe I did. I don't remember. I really like it.
Music was omnivorous. No, so music was all over as a kid because the radio was always on.
Omnipresent's fine. I was just messing with
my dad was listening to classic rock. He had a extensive collection.
Your dad introduced you to classic rock.
Yeah, but when I lived with my grandparents, the radio was kind of always on, and it was like usually just the popular hits of the time. That's why like a lot of that stuff is seared into my like brain engrams, right? And then my uncle,
I don't know if that's real, what you just said.
I believe that's a nerve pattern type thing. So
okay.
Either way, my synapses, I'm just going to pull out brain words. My frontal lobe. So my uncle, my grandparents' in-law, brother or son-in-law, he was around a lot because they had a big garage in this place that we lived. They had a big garage because we lived in this house that was built like behind a post office. But my grandparents owned the building the post office was in.
A lot of details.
No, but this is important. Next to it was this garage, and it's not like your normal 2-car garage. It actually had been like a garage that people worked on vehicles for like a municipality kind of thing, but it then moved on, right? So it was a larger garage. So my uncle loved working on his truck, and he would often work on it there, and they let him, and he would listen to the music of his sort of time, and that was a lot of popular early 80s country. So I have like vivid memories of Eddie Rabbitt and Crystal Gale and all that stuff, which is crazy because I didn't really even know that until a couple years ago when like just something random came up in a playlist I was listening to, and I was like, oh crap.
Yeah. Suddenly you were taken back to your uncle working on his truck.
Yeah, no, I do love the Rainy Nights, Eddie Rabbitt. Please talk about that. Eddie Rabbitt, by the way, was from Brooklyn, New York. He wasn't actually from anywhere country, but he was famous for his country hits. But that was during that...
Was that a country hit? Because I remember that from the radio.
Yeah, it kind of was a crossover. There was that song Lookin' for Love, too. That was a country hit.
So he was kind of like the Kid Rock of his time.
No.
By the way, it became Wookin' Panub.
Eddie Murphy, Saturday Night Live.
It's Buckwheat sings the hits.
Yeah. And so
Bill Baker used to sing that all the time when we were kids.
Yeah. So Looking for Love or Wookin' Panub?
Wookin' Panub.
Okay, yeah. So that was always, the radio was always on. And so I loved listening to music, but I never really trafficked in buying or like collecting music, right? So I don't know if I'm using trafficked right. Illicitly selling music.
I love the way you're putting this.
I wasn't selling 7-inch records from the trunk of a car.
Right. So what was your first record that you owned?
So I should go back a little bit because I should say that something that's going to be a hot take on this show is that I didn't ever collect records. I have a record collection, and it's got some really decent stuff in it, but I never collected records to collect records. I always was just about having the music in a form I could listen to. Okay,
so what was the first thing you chose to have in a format that you could listen to?
I think I had a CNC Music Factory tape at one point, like in the very early 90s.
Somehow I'm so disappointed.
No. And then
also, it makes so much sense.
In the late 80s.
Did you learn to dance to that?
No, I never tried. I had an LL Cool J tape at one point.
You're lying.
No, I didn't try to dance.
Doesn't it say everybody dance now?
Yeah, and it was one of the few times.
And you just sat there still?
It was one of the few times I disregarded what I was told to do.
And you said, someday I'll need this.
So,
someday soon, Bob. I'm assuming the rave days are looming.
Yeah, we can get into that.
Oh, we will.
You keep taking exits off this highway here. So no, I also, and this is going to be a public admission. I also had probably before that, one of the first tapes I owned. Before even that, I was making mixtapes off the radio.
Yeah.
Of just the songs I like to hear.
Did you have a player that could record right off the radio, or were you putting a tape deck up to a radio? And
No. I had my boombox had the ability to record, and they'd be like, "Coming up next, we got Roxette," and I'd be like, "Oh man,
interesting voice that you've done there, Bob." Where did you learn to talk on the radio?
So I would listen to songs on the radio, and I'd record them. You know, I had just these. That was most of what I was doing. Is like mixtapes of that stuff.
Bring them to school, and there were like 2 or 3 kids that would sit and we'd in the library, and we'd.
You were probably listening to way better shit.
Bryan Adams.
Oh no, okay, maybe.
No, yeah, it's a
same kind of stuff.
This would have been.
Cuts Like a Knife is a great album, start to finish.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nope, you're not going to get any.
Yeah.
Any I won't go up against you on that at all.
Yeah.
No pushback.
My sister was getting records. She was getting like the popular hit records. Like she had a couple Bryan Adams records and tapes, and she had I remember
John Cougar Mellencamp.
Ooh,
Jack and Diane was one that I brought to school that we listened to.
My sister
Asia.
Oh yeah, Asia had some good jams,
dude.
Although in the 1982 mix listening thing that I did, the album was ultimately disappointing.
Which was it?
Whatever the album was that they released that year, I can't remember.
It wasn't Alpha, was it?
Can't remember.
Because that's a great record.
I think at the time Pre-Bosk saw my comment about it, and he was like incensed that I wouldn't like the album as much as that I should have, right? So so yeah, I would tape things off the radio. I did that for years, and then I think I found Mariah Carey's first tape.
Let's talk about Asia for a second.
Asia, yeah.
Let's say
Audio Daily Double.
So
name this continent. Asia. The best moment of Saturday Night Live ever, in my opinion.
Wait, okay. What did they play music?
No, it was Celebrity Jeopardy.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those ones where like Will Ferrell was like just dying, right? And he's like, they're throwing the easiest softball pitches at everyone. And then it's like, I think it was one with a Burt Reynolds appearance by Norm Macdonald. And the Audio Daily Double was, name this continent. And then the way they delivered like the sound sample was just a voice saying, Asia. And nobody gets it. And I like cry laughing like anytime I see it. So either way, go on. You want to talk about Asia, the band?
Well, yeah, I do. Because maybe I'm wrong.
Heat of the moment, right?
Positive
I've
ever
in my head right now.
seen the members of Asia.
They were a supergroup.
But I'm assuming they're not Asian.
No, I think they were made up of members of Yes or something like that and other bands, but I could be wrong. They were like, I think, a supergroup of some sort.
Could a band today, had there never been a band called Asia, but everything else was the same, could a band of white guys call themselves Asia?
That's a good question. Like, we could diverge from normal things that you talk about on this podcast and talk about cultural appropriation. But like
just that little bit,
but
we can diverge a little.
Should they have? I don't know. But
should they have then?
But yeah, I don't know. Like, because it doesn't make people are like, back in the day when slavery wasn't considered wrong by most people. Yet you know what? There were tons of people who thought slavery was wrong. Most of them were slaves. So like,
yes.
So just because Asia did it back in the 80s doesn't make it, they didn't own slaves. The hot take is that Asia owned slaves. The band Asia.
What are you doing?
No.
Okay.
No, so the thing
what about the
Asia,
song Africa?
That's a weird song.
What about the video for the song Africa?
Bad video. But also, let's talk about how
remember they're playing on a big book.
Yeah. No, that was and by the way, Weezer just covered Africa, and it's a huge deal right now. So I think that the band Asia, it's kind of nondescript, right? It's just like they point their finger at a map and they're just like, that sounds like a cool 2-syllable word, right? So I don't know that they were trying
You could get in a lot of trouble if you were just picking your band name by like spinning a globe and putting your finger down.
Well, I mean,
or just opening a book and you could really get some bad choices that way.
I guess they didn't do it they weren't like, this is Oriental or anything. They didn't try to do Asian things, right?
They weren't Styx.
Yeah. What? People who live near the River Styx were so pissed. Charon is like...
No, I mean, didn't they do Asian stuff in Styx?
Oh, Mr. Roboto.
There you go.
Yeah, that's fucked.
And they sing a don't.
I didn't really think of it that way. Amazing, terrible jam. But by the way, I have Heat of the Moment, because that's an Asia song. That was just in my head, and now it's Mr. Roboto. We're keeping track.
Well, those totally make sense.
Yeah.
You were listening to all this stuff back then.
No, not really like seeking it out. It was just whatever was on the radio. And then I had a Mariah Carey tape.
Oh yeah, Mariah Carey. So, God, I'm sorry.
And then I had her second album too.
Were you real impressed with her 6-octave range or whatever it is?
I was like totally in love with her. Yeah. But not in the way that like people like fawn over divas or anything. I just had like a celeb crush on her, right? So, and like I knew I liked music, but I wasn't like sure what I liked.
What was her big hit off that record?
Vision of Love.
Oh.
Yeah. I could probably sing every song in that first album. Like
Don't.
Poorly. Very poorly.
Wait, which is was it on the radio, Vision of Love?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, it totally was. I'm not gonna there was also Someday was the song. Oh man, I have like high school memories around that song. Someday was about like the one that you gave away will be the only one you're wishing for, right?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, and so yeah, I had some awkward high school memories about that. But so I started figuring out music. I started liking music and buying music, but it was always stuff that like was just popular hits, right?
And none of it was, you were never like, you can't listen to that music. No one was telling you,
no,
guiding you specifically.
No, I think my dad would have loved it if I was listening to anything controversial, right? Because like I was a real square. My grandmother called me a square. She's like, do you know what L7 means? By the way, they're a great band, but if L7...
Your grandmother turned you on to L7?
I used to tuck in my fucking t-shirts. And she's like, I got this t-shirt as a gift one time and the print went like too low to tuck it in. She's like, you're not supposed to tuck your shirt in. You're supposed to. And I was just like, the whole idea of not tucking in my shirt just blew my mind. And I just couldn't deal.
Right.
And that's kind of where I was at the time.
Did you work out of that somehow?
Mostly, yeah, I think. I mean, this shirt isn't tucked in.
No, I know. I'm noticing. I want to know where, because you, over the years, have described yourself to be as a real nerdy kid.
Yeah, I was real square.
You told me you talked about going to space camp.
Oh, I did in 1988.
Right.
Or 9.
But I think you said you were too nerdy for space camp.
The kids at space camp made fun of me for being nerdy.
That's nerdy.
Yeah, but they weren't all nerds. Like sometimes it was like kind of a popular place to go at the time. Like, I mean, the movie had come out a couple years before and NASA was like still in the zeitgeist.
So actually the truth of that story is you got a little cheated by pop culture.
Yeah, yeah.
Space camp should have been your people.
Yeah, it should have been. Like, I mean...
Now I'm actually a little offended about this whole thing. Like, I've always thought of it as being... I thought it was other nerds rejected you.
No, I mean, even the nerdier people there, seeing that I was being cast as the nerd, would work to keep that going, right?
Well, you're
like
a shield.
Yeah.
From them now.
Yeah.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. But again, like, it was
Sad.
never physical bullying. I got made fun of enough, but
You're
never
like,
physical bullying.
it's like the second fastest antelope is thrilled you're there.
Yeah. Well, there's the joke about the people at the camp and the bears charging the camp. One starts running and the other starts tying their shoes. And the person that's running is like, why are you tying your shoes? And the guy tying his shoes or the girl tying her shoes is like, I don't have to beat the bear. I just have to beat you. And so, yeah.
Yep, classic.
So, yeah, I was the one that everyone was trying to be ahead of at space camp. No, so I was nerdy and I listened to a bunch of stuff and I wasn't really quite sure what was out there. And I remember there was some skater kids in middle school that listened to music that I never was really exposed to, but their rebellious ways seemed a little bit too much for me at the time.
At first you were like, not for me.
That was the first thing that had anything to do with hardcore that I ever saw, that I can now identify as such, was a couple skater, like slacker kids in science class were drawing the DRI guy. On like
the first thing you remember is DRI.
Yeah, was on everything.
What do you know?
On fucking everything. They were drawing it on their notebooks, and I was like, oh, and they're like trying to explain what this band meant to them. And I was like, cool, that just doesn't sound like something I'm gonna do. And
okay, but it didn't attract you. You remember the image.
I didn't hear it, right? So and then MTV was always on, like on their cable selection and stuff. But I believe it was the summer after my well, I mean, I heard Nirvana on the radio, and that was fucking mind blowing. I was like, this song is really good. And I was feeling teenage angst of my own. And, you know, socially, like all of this stuff, as far as chickens coming home to roost, as far as like, you know, like having a lifetime of being the nerdiest dude, but not the nerdiest, like one that everyone made fun of or would physically like, you know, want to fight. I was just kind of forgotten by most people.
Were you getting bigger?
I was getting taller.
Were you always tall?
I was starting to get tall. Yeah, I was tall in high school. Like I was 6'2" by the time I was a senior, but I was also like 155. So I was like, a strong wind would like blow me down. So there was a lot going through my head. I was like, man, this music is really aggro. And then I remember taking Smells Like Teen Spirit out of the library and like dubbing it onto a tape.
Okay. You actually were getting the music that got you into punk rock came from the library.
Probably, yeah.
Like checking out a tape.
That or the radio. Yeah. And then what happened was I was like, at that point, I was like, when I was a kid in elementary school and middle school, it was frustrating to not be social to some degree. But by the time I was in high school, I was like really like socially not as developed as the rest of the kids. Cause I had I sat with some people for lunch and, you know, I had a date to my junior prom and I had a date to my senior ball. But it was the same thing as prom, right? But those were all sort of like accidental or like sort of, you know, they just sort of happened. But I was never as social or as like a lot of the kids I saw around me. I felt really awkward about it. I felt different in a way that was somewhat painful. And then this is I started high school in like 1990. And so there's a concept of this college rock morphing into, you know, to like alternative rock or whatever. And
things change there.
And there was late night on the radio. Certain stations would play like these kind of things. And like there'd be like an alternative show or whatever, or you could catch the college radio station if you tuned it in just right. Or, you know, so that stuff started happening and
it started appealing to you.
It started appealing to me because it seemed like there was this stuff that like could evoke feelings in me that like, or could talk to feelings in me that were both like fantastic like discoveries, but also resonated a lot with me, right? Like there was just this idea of, oh man, this song is like, wow. And so, I mean, I went down that path that like a lot of people did. From Nirvana, I found Pearl Jam and then Alice in Chains, like Seattle scene, if you will, kind of influenced some of that. And then I started talking about that stuff a lot, you know, just because I verbally processed just about everything. And some kids in my hallway at school made me, one of them, Derek, made me a mixtape, and it had a bunch of stuff on it, including the first time I ever heard Minor Threat.
Oh, and so because you were talking about liking the Seattle stuff, someone made you a tape with Minor Threat on it.
Well, it had a bunch of stuff. It had two Bad Brain songs, How Low Can a Punk Get and Rock for Light. It had I think it had two Minor Threat songs on it, but it also had Voivod and like this band called Sal that was kind of like a grunge band that nobody like really remembers anymore. But that one song was like there. There was a bunch of stuff on it. It had Biohazard on it, you know, with that "Where is justice?
Well, so that was
where is punishment?" You know.
So that was a person who was looking for people that needed to know.
Well, I mean, this kid was...
It was like a Johnny Appleseed of a music guy. He's like, oh, hey, here's someone who's waking up to a sound. I better make him a mixtape.
Well, I mean, I can't...
You're not even saying this was a friend of yours.
No, he was... Well, I mean, I guess he was friendly, you know, but we didn't hang. Like, I didn't have friends like that. I went home and...
Right, but you start talking music and he brings you a mixtape.
Yeah. And then at the very same time this is happening, and this is important
to know... If Matsuoka was here, he'd make this into a very different story.
Yeah. At the very same time this is all happening, I, in 9th grade... started running, and I considered going out for track that year, and kids laughed at me because I was never the athlete, right? And then I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. But sophomore year, I was like, I'm going to do this. And if I don't get through tryouts for track, I just probably won't do it. I couldn't handle rejection. But the thing about track was they don't have tryouts. If you show up to practice and you do what you're asked, you're on the team. Sometimes there's like meets that some people can go to and you can't. But you're just on the team.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. And that's informed a lot of my life since then, in many ways. And we can talk about that. But these two things are happening. I'm socializing a little bit with the track team. There's people in my cohort of classes that know me for what I am, someone who talks a lot, but is really kind of to the greater group of people kind of unrecognizable, like blends into the crowd. I'm not socially very adept. I'm figuring out this music thing. And then I got put in a forced socialization sort of spot in the end of my 10th grade year. So I don't know if this mixtape happened a little before that or a little after that, but I go to this science workshop that mostly seniors and juniors go to, but I was a sophomore. I was about to be a sophomore, and I got into it. I was sufficiently nerdy to go to this place, and it was a college in the Adirondack Mountains, which are in northern New York. They're like a big state park. There was a nature study station where they I can't remember what college, but a couple colleges probably had like classes that they would do. And there was like a week-long gap where like they invited high school students from all around the region to go to this camp and learn about doing transects and all these kind of things that are sciencey that I don't do anymore, right? And but so I was forced to be around these people and socialize with them, and that was really cool and eye-opening. And a lot of them were older than me because I was probably the youngest kid there, and then some of them were way into like different music, and then that called to me some more. And I was like, man, this is this stuff, and they were listening to The Cure, which by the way I could never really get into, or Cocteau Twins, which I could totally get into,
Oh,
yeah. And
it's not a big leap.
I find Robert Smith to be somewhat insufferable, but
all right, just go ahead and take the cans off, and we'll just see your way out the door.
I knew that this would happen, so am I supposed to storm out of this interview, or do you storm out of it at this point?
Who storms out? I forget.
Yes. The interviewer, like, fuck you, man. I'm in your house. I'm leaving. So
whatever, it's not for everybody.
No. I mean, I don't dislike them, but like,
no, you're not getting out.
It's fine. There's some stuff that's good, but I just
start digging a new one.
Yeah, that's fine. In the backyard. And so
the second hole's your grave.
So this is all happening at this. Then I start noticing like the certain sort of like visual tags that are associated with some of these alternative people, besides just the skater punks, right?
Yeah.
Like there's the kids wearing the bands that I recognize, and then there's the kids that are their friends that are wearing other bands that I don't recognize, like T-shirts. Forever I thought that Snapcase was maybe a tool company, like Snap-on Tools. I mean, it's a fucking terrible band name, but it wasn't. And then there was Into Another. Oh, that same mixtape had a couple Into Another songs on it.
Okay.
And I fucking loved that band.
Of course you did.
It was a huge band in Syracuse at the time. Yeah. And all of this, by the way, is undergirded by the fact that at this time in Syracuse, there was a huge underground music scene going on. Like a punk rock and hardcore scene that was mostly focused on the hardcore bands that would come up from New York City. For years, Sick of It All said that Syracuse was their favorite place to play outside of their hometown.
Sure.
I mean, shit was wild, and I had no connection to that except through these tenuous things that were starting to connect. But someone invited me to a show when I was a junior, and the whole concept of going and being social and being in that so uncomfortable to me that I didn't even pursue like it any further. I was like, oh, I don't think I can. I think I have things to do. My dad won't let me. Again, my dad would have probably lost his mind if I did anything. It's like he wanted me to do rebellious shit, but I wasn't, right? So I started like sort of living in this place, and as far as with this music, and then I got a job at a diner down the street. When I turned 16, I know two things my dad said to me. I can remember that he said, "Happy birthday," because he never forgot. Mm-hmm. But he also said, "When are you going to get a job?"
Right. Because he threw you a pack of smokes.
and the mining hat, and then I joined it. No, but what happened was my dad was a firm believer in getting a job when you turn 16. Mm-hmm. So he's like there was a run up to that. He's like, "You'll be 16 soon. Get ready." And then I know that he asked me on that day when I was going to get a job, and so I got a job at this diner down the street. And
what did you do?
I washed dishes.
Okay.
And occasional potato peeling, but mostly washing dishes. But there was a cook there who graduated from the school that I was going to a few years earlier, and her name was Cheryl. And she was great, and her boyfriend Eric was cool. And they also listened to college rock because they were that age. And they thought I was like this just fun kid who was really trying to fit in. And they got me a little more than some people did. So like they invited me to their house a couple times while they were playing poker with their friends. All of these people that were a little bit older than me. And then this is right about the time I graduated. Mm-hmm. Cheryl's like, yo, dude, I'm going to go to this club, Zodiac. They're having alternative night. It's in Syracuse. So it's like, for me, that's the city. It's like 20 minutes away. And she's like, I can get you in. I think I can talk to the bouncers and get you in. And you should come because you talk about this music all the time. By that time, I was like hunting down tapes and CDs and,
This was like punk rock and hardcore?
Well, mostly still alternative music. I still hadn't really figured out that like what punk rock and hardcore was. And I knew it had a sort of connection to some of the music I was listening to, but for me it was still like, because the things I was most used to was like the more accessible things. So I was buying like was way into Nine Inch Nails at the time, and there was like various.
Hold on a second. And we're back.
Did you let the dog out?
I did. I let the dog out.
Okay. We finally answered the question after today on
We're not there yet.
Okay, so radio voice off. No, so I was into like that kind of stuff that was like Buzzbin clips and stuff like that, and like.
And what year are we talking?
Belly, Breeders, stuff like that. And by the way, the Breeders, one of my favorite bands to this day.
Right, but so you're talking, we're in like 92, 93?
We're in the early 90s at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. The Breeders remain, to this day, one of my favorite bands. And Last Splash is an unimpeachably wonderful album.
That's so many.
Yeah. And you don't have to agree, but I know it to be true. So say we all. Except
it really helped make those early State skits really good. And it's too bad they were not able to have them in them.
So
in the end.
This music appealed to me, and I do remember one other thing. I remember listening to tapes very loudly on my tape Walkman, and so loud, in fact, that I was mowing the lawn and still could hear them. And by the way, my hearing is damaged to no end.
I used to mow the lawn with headphones and a tape Walkman and turn it up loud enough to hear while I was mowing. Sure.
Yeah. So I remember...
Except I did it with Twisted Sister.
Yeah. No, I remember this moment listening to that mixtape that Derek had made. He made me another one, but it wasn't as good as the first. The first one was just so great. There were so many good things on it. Op Ivy had 2 songs from Op Ivy on it. Like, he did doubles of a lot of the shorter stuff. Mm-hmm. It had Unity, which was so good. And I still didn't figure this out. Like, it was staring me in the face that there was this access to this stuff, but I didn't like parse it the same way. That it was all new to me. Everything was new to me.
Right.
And so, Aram sometimes has that conversation where he's like, if the Juggalo family had come into the world at a certain point in my life in Calgary, would that have appealed to me? Right?
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting question.
Sure.
Because one of the things that, hate Juggalos like you might, one of the things that is like...
You feel like they're lost punks?
No, I think that like they do one thing that's very interesting. It's a lot about community, right? And community is like very important to me. Like I make communities and I live in those communities, or I engage in, sort of joining communities, like the community of kids I coach, or the community of parents that help out, or the sort of collective community of those people, or the community of my friends. But for me,
the panda community.
What is it? What the fucking panda community?
Where you learn your stories.
Oh yes, my spirit animal. I thought you were going like on some sort of furry route here. I was like, please don't get me anywhere near that shit. No, so
I won't expose you.
No, that's weird. That's weird. People can like what they like. That's not a thing I like. So, at the time I was like sort of grasping at all these different things. I remember mowing the lawn and Minor Threat coming on that tape, and just like it was this no set of rules speech, and Out of Step.
So Out of Step was
and I remember thinking, man, this song, like I feel like I'm close to being there with people, but I've always felt like I'm one step off, or, and it really sort of struck at me a little bit. And then, but still, I didn't have the social, like, sort of bravery or whatever, and the sort of, I couldn't put 2 and 2 together quite the same way.
So did you go to this show with this woman from your work?
It wasn't a show, it was an alternative night.
Oh.
And I did. And
so is that the cross-section of rave culture and
No. We can get to that. So I'm still trying to find a place at this point. So, and this would put us at about early to mid 94, right before I graduated from high school.
Okay.
And then I graduated from high school, and I'm listening to all this music, but I still don't know where it's from, or that I could easily have access to some of this stuff by going and being around people That's not a thing I'm good at.
And you're just now. There's a burgeoning internet. Well, it's starting to. It's a couple years away.
I didn't tap into it until I got into college.
Yeah, you couldn't. That makes sense because you couldn't. The web wasn't really a thing for a little while that worked for people.
Yeah, no.
People were still dial-up.
Netscape Navigator, and yeah. So we didn't really do that at home. So computer labs at college were when I figured all that stuff out. When I first got email, that kind of stuff. But so I'm at this alternative night, and I run into this woman there. Her name's Shannon, and we hit it off. And it's like, cool, this lady thinks I'm worth recontacting. So I gave her my number, and she gave me her number. I don't know how it worked at the time. And
I think that's how it works when you give numbers.
We got in touch with each other a couple times, and we hung out. And I graduated right around the same time, and I'm like, wow, this alternative chick really digs me. And that's teenage me saying that, right? So we hang out a bit throughout the summer, just off and on for a little bit. I find a record store up by the university because I go up to the university in Syracuse to hang out with her because she lives in that area. And I find more stuff, and I start realizing that maybe there are shows that I can go to. But I didn't she wasn't into the same things that I would eventually become into. And in fact, the first time anyone talked about straight edge with me, it was her. And I wasn't drinking. I thought that was terrible. My dad smoked for years and years and years, and I thought it was disgusting. I also thought when I was a little kid that cancer that he would get from smoking would be transmissible to me.
Oh.
So I wouldn't share drinks or anything with him because I was like, he's certainly going to get cancer from this smoking, and then I'm going to catch it.
Oh.
And so I met this girl, and she was awesome, and she hated straight edge kids.
Mm.
At the time, Syracuse had a very present straight edge scene, and you could go.
It had been around for a while.
It had, and you could go either way with it. There were people who thought it was overly militant and intolerant, and I mean, I'm sure there were those elements in it. And at the time, there was no shortage of the university district and the punk and straight edge kids, and also the various other groups of people who lived in this area. There were fights and stuff occasionally, but that was stuff that really happened a lot before I became involved. I knew people from high school that were involved with the scene, but I wasn't really, figuring it out. And then that summer, I really figured out a lot of it, but I didn't end up going to my first show until I was comfortable with going with somebody, because I couldn't go by myself. I couldn't do it.
So what was your first show?
Well, so there were a couple things. I ran into Derek and his friend at the mall. No, yeah, was it Derek? No, I'm sorry. It was two kids who knew Derek from my high school at the mall one time, and they were going to a show, and it was some local bands that were metal bands, and I went to that. And then there was one band that did a bunch of punk covers and stuff, and I was like, oh, this is cool.
That was your first show?
Yeah, it was at the Lost Horizon, and there was virtually nobody there, and the Lost Horizon's inevitably becomes a big part of the story of anyone who grew up in Syracuse at the time, because that's the place where most shows happened. And then first week or two of college, there was a ska show at a coffee shop, and I went to that, and it was a local band, and they were really a huge deal to me because super nice people. I knew them from the coffee shop and stuff like that, and from the record store that I'd eventually work at, and they played a kind of third wave ska, I guess. I don't know, it wasn't punk ska, it was legit ska.
Okay.
And I enjoyed it a lot, and a couple people that I still know to this day I met there. But the first show was, there was this gap without a bunch of shows. I missed it into another show because I had to work, and then I was bummed. And then I saw Quicksand, Orange 9mm, and Helmet.
Mm-hmm.
No, wait, yeah, Orange, yeah, it was Quicksand, Orange 9mm, and Helmet, and that place was packed. It was the Lost Horizon. It was, for a long time, they claimed that it was probably the biggest show they've had.
And Sick of It All didn't play that one.
No, that was later. Yeah, but I saw that too. That's a show. But yeah, and I have all these friends that had been to tons of shows before that, but I couldn't. I was just socially so inept that I couldn't deal. I'd been listening to Quicksand for a little bit before the show. I also started getting to a lot of things. Once college started, I went to Syracuse University, there was so much stuff being thrown at me. It was all so fast. But that Quicksand show was huge. And man, it was so great. They were so good.
Oh, yes.
And then I got into listening to a lot of that Rev stuff, and because it's the label, and then a bunch of other things. And I was working at a record store.
Then you discovered Revelation. Okay, so then you
Yeah.
got a job.
Yeah.
How long after high school did you go into college? Was there a break in between?
Nope. There was just like, I was 17 when I started college.
Oh, okay.
Because my birthday's in September. So, yeah, I came to do that. I ran a season of college cross country as well. And because I thought that was my social group, was track people, and it wasn't. Or runners
You kind of
weren't.
figured it out.
Not at the time.
So quick things. You never played an instrument.
No, I didn't.
I
didn't skateboard.
You didn't skateboard. You didn't do any of that stuff.
I read books and kept to myself.
Right.
Yeah.
So, how did you hook up with people that were going to have you in a band?
Oh.
And how did you go down the dual paths of hardcore music and rave music?
Oh, so I get to college and I notice a couple things. There's these people that live in these alternative subcultures, and I dive in, and I don't know where to dive in. So I dive into a couple places. I frequent ska shows because that was one of the first bands that I saw, but I never frequented ska fashion. I just want to say that.
Okay.
I was never a sharp dresser, if you will, but I frequented baggy clothes at the time because everyone did. But I started going to hardcore shows all the time, and we were really fortunate to have a lot of them for a city our size too, and that goes back to that scene that had just been there the whole time. And then I also was like, some people kind of lived in this world where like rave music was kind of like a thing. And when I went to that alternative night at the club, there was a lot of rave-ish dance music there and a lot of like New Order and stuff like that too.
Cool.
But like there was that sort of, some people went electronic, some people didn't.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of checking all of that stuff out. And there was some club nights, and people that I liked went to those club nights. So I went with them. And yeah, so people could find me at the occasional rave. But us in the rave community, we called them parties, right? Why call them raves? Yeah, there's a party coming up, or you could find me mostly at shows because there were way more shows than there were.
But you were going to both.
I was going to both.
When was the first time you danced with glow sticks?
I only ever did that once.
Okay, then that's the first time.
It was sometime in 1995. You're here you can drag me, and that's cool.
I'm not dragging you. You went to a rave and danced with glow sticks in 1995.
And about 2,000 people at that same rave did the same thing. So.
Yeah, I wish there was a photo.
Yeah, I'm so glad there isn't.
Did you ever wear like a pacifier around your neck?
No.
But you did have the big jeans, right?
I had a rubber ducky. I just was trying out some fashion stuff.
Wait, you had a rubber ducky affixed to you?
To a chain around my neck at one point, yeah.
Okay.
I wore huge jeans. That lasted for like 2 weeks.
Did you did they have like rave names? Did you have like a nickname, or was there anything like that?
Yeah, I got the same nickname in the hardcore and the rave community.
Raver Bob?
I cannot confirm or deny that name. So
okay.
I would say that both places came upon it at the same time.
Okay. But you started making friends in the hardcore scene.
Yeah, that was the place that... One of the things that was really kind of weird... so the freshman year of college ends, and I'm living... some friends of mine from club nights and raves and stuff, they're like, we have a place in our apartment. You can stay with us. And meanwhile, I'm also like mostly hanging out with people I go to shows with, because those people are like way more conscious, like literally like conscious. They're awake, Mm-hmm. This isn't me like using a metaphor to explain how they were. One of the things that really struck me about college was all these people were like in all these classes all day. And then to let off steam, they would get obliterated. And I was just like, why would you do that? Don't you want to remember this time that you have to yourself? Like, this is fucking great. I can remember all this stuff. Now I can't remember anything, but that's just because I'm like ADHD. But all these people would just get obliterated, and they'd feel terrible, and they couldn't remember anything from the weekend, and then they'd go right back into this grind, right? Yeah. And I could never do that, right? And so then Shannon, the punk rock girl who hated straight edge kids, she and I not really hung out much past the beginning of that year. She also didn't know I was 17. She thought I was older, which was cool. That was a neat revelation. She's like, I'm 21. And I'm like, I'm fortunate, I guess. But she...
What's the age of consent in New York, Bob?
Well, it didn't matter. We didn't do anything that would have violated any of that. So,
all right.
So Shannon's hatred of straight edge notwithstanding, I ended up being like, it's no set of rules, but it is what I am, and so I claimed that in 94.
Do you remember the date? The
It was
day?
early October.
Early
I don't remember
October
the exact.
94.
Yeah, I
At a
don't.
show?
No, it was just like on my own. I was like,
You came to a conclusion.
yeah, and I had to change virtually nothing.
But that's your day.
Yeah, I stopped drinking caffeinated sodas, and that was
You literally gave something up that you didn't have to.
We will disagree about this. No, I'm
Whatever.
just kidding. And I never drank coffee, so it wasn't a loss there. So, and so yeah, no, here I am, end of my first year in college, and I'm dealing with these people who let me live in their house, but I'm really hanging out with actually sober people most of the time. And when these people invited me to live in their house, it was late winter, and so the party season, in quotes, hadn't really begun. And so when the summer hit, there were lots of raves and a lot of parties and stuff. I went to fewer and fewer of those, and they went to more and more of those, and they were not present, like mentally, a lot. They were, I mean, some of them were sleeping 24 hours at a time. Like, it was like, cool, do you want to go hang out? Oh, I can't right now, man. I can't do that. Just still feeling a little weird from last night. And it's like, cool, then I'm going to go hang out with people that are actually engaged with life. Right. And then there was a couple violent incidents, including someone attacking me when they were high. And I had a gun pulled on me by one of the people that dealt acid to them. And I was
Why did they pull a gun on you?
They pulled a gun on me because they thought it was hilarious.
Oh,
they had just purchased this gun, and they came into the house, and I was the first person they saw. And they were like, they just pulled the gun and aimed it directly at me and walked towards me slowly without saying a thing.
Jesus.
And I was just like, what the fuck? I'm done with this place. I had been jumped by my roommate, like, who was high on, like, some weird shit a couple days earlier. No, that happened a couple days after that, and then I was done. But I was like, this is not okay. And yeah, I started falling way off of that stuff. And the last rave I ever went to was like early 96. And it was pretty much done.
Well, that was it. I had it in my head that you just did this for years and years.
No, and that's what a nickname like the one you mentioned gives you. It gives you this sort of sense that like this guy still does that. So just
so we're clear, something you hadn't done for a full 5 years before you met me, you were still being called that name when I met you.
Yeah.
And somehow it had followed you to a town where you knew no one and were there by yourself.
Yeah, well, so that's rough because for a while, because it was the nickname I was known as, I just used it.
Oh, you're saying that you willingly said that was who I was.
Yeah, and I don't regret it. Like, I mean, I don't harbor a whole lot of regrets about anything, but like, if I had it to do again, I would have been like, well, I haven't gone to a rave in a couple of years. Maybe I should use something else.
Were we a little too brutal to you when you got here with it?
No, I mean, everyone throughout life has been, so, and that's fine.
Brutality is just in your DNA.
Yeah, and there's certain people that I consider...
Not right. That would be you being brutal.
Yeah, well, being brutalized is in my DNA. No, I think that as a comedic heel, I'm pretty good, for that, for most people. But no, so I don't know. I think that there's a couple people that retain the right to call me that without me being super pissed at them. And those are people I've known for like 20 odd years, right?
Right.
But anyway.
Oh, so you haven't known me 20 odd years.
Well, yeah, and you don't come from a place where you...
And I don't call you that all the time.
Yeah, you don't come from a place where you were around when I was called that, initially, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, and so I'm at that point I'm just firmly ensconced in going to shows, and in about 97, a couple kids and I get together and start a band. I wanted to do something like Gorilla Biscuits was like the best thing ever for me. I loved it so much, and I wanted to be in a band that sounded like Gorilla Biscuits and or Minor Threat,
right,
or any of those bands that were fast.
Sure.
And
what is the music that they're going to come up with sound like, and that's what we'll be like? They were going to come up with the music, right?
Yeah, I couldn't write music, so
right. So you're saying like Gorilla Biscuits or these other bands. It just depends on kind of what the music they present.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I took that. I took that the wrong way. I thought you meant the people I was in the band with. Of course, I was at their mercy for whatever they wanted to write. I did in 95 try to start a band with a friend, and we had 2 practices in the basement of a dorm. But what really happened was Grant, Audrey, Jimmy, Emmett, and me started Set in Motion, which was a fast punk band in a city that didn't have
Set in Motion.
A city that didn't have a fast punk band, right? Like there was a couple punk bands from high school kids that we kind of found each other at the same time. And there were a couple like weird and violent incidents at shows that like were bigger shows that really were unappealing to me. And at the same time, like Earth Crisis, which was this huge band that I was like way into at the time, they started touring with bands that like I liked to listen to, but when I saw them, they represented a lot of things that were really like thuggish to me, and that wasn't me.
Right.
And so I started gravitating towards a different scene of punks at a local community center, kind of shows there. And I was still going to hardcore shows, but there were some I was skipping on purpose, and instead would be going to different punk rock shows. And there was definitely a divide there, but a lot of kids went back and forth.
Right.
But yeah, Set in Motion started there. I mean, and we played shows for a couple of years. We played shows from 97 to 99.
Did you release anything?
We did a demo, and it was a 4-track demo recorded in a garage, and it had 9 songs. Nobody puts 9 songs on a demo. And when you hear those 9 songs, which I've been afforded the opportunity to do for the first time in about 15 years recently, you understand that regardless of like how good those 9 songs were, because they weren't good at all, no band ever should put 9 songs on a demo, right? And so, there were 9 songs on that demo, and I was terrible. But the music was really good, and the people I played with are lifelong friends, right? And they've gone on to do other bands that I really enjoy. Except for Audrey, she stopped playing music after that. I think she was our bass player. But yeah, I mean, that lasted for a bit, and then I went on to be in another band, which was the Gunmen and Flight Paths.
Yep.
And that was a bunch of weirdos. Like, I mean, there was a drummer who ended up being like, he was straight edge, but there was 2 other guys in the band, and they were just kind of into different stuff. Like,
you put out a 7-inch.
Yeah, we did with, my idea for the artwork of the 7-inch didn't work out quite the way I wanted it to. The person who made the artwork is great and did what I asked, but like, could have probably done like way better if someone else had like given him free rein to do that. And so it's not when you see a 7-inch and you're flipping through bins, sometimes it's the cover art that gets you, right? Mm-hmm. That cover art will never get anyone.
Never catch anyone.
And so
explain the name.
So the guitar player was way into like bands like Angel Hair, and that was the thing that I was really into, like a lot of like
Gravity Records
stuff at the time, yeah. And again, Syracuse didn't have a scene like that either. And he was also into just being weird. He was way into like punk from a different place than I came into it. Like he was into Flipper, and that got him into Dead Kennedys, where we could kind of see common ground there. And he was into a lot of like different weird stuff. And he also was into like, he thought that whole, at the same time, you remember Bob Dobbs, the pipe smoking thing?
Church of the Subgenius.
Yeah, he was way into like Church of the Subgenius stuff. Not seriously.
Oh, I thought I could pull. Sorry, I just walked over to my bookshelf. I thought I could pull the Church of the Subgenius book out.
Yeah, well, he really dug that. He got a Bob Dobbs tattoo on his arm, and he also like found this diagram about like,
he's always talking about Slack.
Yeah, well, he was talking about a lot of different stuff from that, but there was like the whole Subgenius thing also involved a bunch of faux conspiratorial stuff, and there was this diagram of Dealey Plaza, which is where JFK was shot, which had like all these different things, and it was labeled Gunmen and Flight Paths. So
that's a great place to get a name for a band.
Oh yeah, no, it was great, and I immediately loved the name. And it was all this diagram of all these places people could have been, and the planes that flew over to kill John, like, because that's just kind of the way that weird shit worked, right? So that's where the band's name came from, and we played for about a year, and it was just wildly different than anything I'd done. And that's actually where like I figured out timing, and I figured out like my vocal range could be different, and I really enjoy listening to that music. Some of the lyrics I wrote, cringe-worthy a little bit, but I mean, whatever. I mean, I was trying to be more emotional at the time, but like I don't cringe nearly as much as I do listening to my first band, right? And man, it was a fun, weird time. And we went and we recorded a demo, and we had played a show the night before, and my voice was fucked. And I remember them being super worried about it. And I was like, I'm so sorry, guys. Like, I'm going to fuck this up. And they started making plans. What are we going to do if Bob just can't record? And then I get up to the mic, because they did everything else, and I'm listening. And then whatever came out was just like this fucking raw, awesome thing that like totally just blew my mind, blew their mind. We were like, this is great. I remember being so surprised by how it sounded that I like re-listened to it a bunch, because I was just like, I did that.
Then you're trying to repeat it, right?
Yeah, and I could after that, but like I got there kind of accidentally. I was so nervous about it. And man, I fucking loved that recording. And that's the only recording that band ever did. There's a live show somewhere we did, but that's pretty much it. And it was made into the 7-inch. So, yeah. And then
the live show was made into the 7-inch.
No. I'm sorry.
Demo.
The demo was made into the 7-inch.
Got
Yeah.
it.
You remind me of the Babe. What Babe? The Babe with the power. I don't know why that happened, but power of voodoo. Hoodoo. You do. Dance magic, dance magic, dance magic. So where are we going, man?
We're about there.
We're about there. So yeah, Gunman and Flight Paths.
So at some point, and then you become the world's biggest Spark Lights the Friction fan.
They got a great. Their name was from a Spanacorzo song. No, not a Spanacorzo song. Shotmaker song.
Okay.
They were like that was just friends of mine from my last band, plus a couple other friends.
It's weird because I was just thinking Spanacorzo like 10 minutes ago when you were talking about Gravity Records. I'm like, I wonder if you liked that band.
I did. I liked a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
I was listening to a lot of stuff.
So my problem with that stuff, as much as I loved all that Gravity Records stuff, is, and Heroin and you know, the band.
Yes, I was just thanks for
is that I always in my head it was better. Like I'd see stuff advertised like, oh, there's this band called Candle, and I'd be like, that's gonna be the one. That's gonna, you know. Or then you'd hear Mohinder, and you'd be like, that might be as good as I'm hoping. Like, you know, like you're right. It's right there. I just kind of expected. Eventually, I put out a band called Slow Side Down, which was Bill Baker's band, with some dudes from Portland. Yeah, and that to me is what I kind of always wanted that scene to sound like. You know,
some of that stuff, like in my opinion, it could have gone a couple ways. When it was good, it was amazing. When it was bad, it could be bad in different ways. It could be like overly like fashion obsessed or weird.
Yeah.
And, although like some of that stuff I still dug, or it could just be shitty, like bad musicianship trying to be like, you know, whatever. But, like for example, people loved this band Orchid, which was kind of like you could draw a straight line from some of that stuff to Orchid. And I dug a couple early things, and then I was just like, I cannot deal with this anymore. And I don't know, like that whole like early, whatever people called it, screamo-ish stuff was like, you know, I started diverging from some of that, but I still love like Angel Hair and Spanacorzo and Swing Kids. That was a fucking amazing record, and you know, just other stuff like that is great, you know. So
that's where Spark Lights the Friction.
No, they got their name from Shotmaker, which was a Canadian band.
Yep.
But that was a bunch of people who'd been in Set in Motion with me, plus one other person. 3 people from Set in Motion, one other person. And they played something different. It was like Hum meets Quicksand. It was what meets Hot Water Music a little bit with different vocals, right? I mean, just musically, it was in my wheelhouse in a major way. And they were such good friends. And that was such a great time in my life that band is not only my favorite because I love the music, but it was like the soundtrack to when everything was fucking great, right? And so I can't necessarily separate the two. Is their band does it have the most easy to say name? No. Does it like relate to anybody in like real life? We shared a practice space. Gunman and Flight Paths shared a practice space with them. And one of the big jokes about our bands was that nobody would say our names right, you know?
Right.
And we considered doing a 7-inch where like, you know, we could make fun of that, like a split 7-inch where we did one side and they did the other side. And then maybe the cover art would have different versions of what people called us. Right. But it didn't happen. And we shared a sketchy practice space together. And I mean, I went on various shows with them. I was never like their main roadie, but I roadied a couple shows for them, and I loved them. They were great. And that was kind of a weird, wonderful time. Yeah.
And that was before you came out. Just before you came out to the Northwest.
Yeah, it was the tail end of that was all sort of falling apart at that point. Like Sparklights Friction / show, I think it was early 2001.
Now, was it Sparklights the Friction guys that also did the side band that was the
Shirts as Pants?
No.
Yeah. No, you mean the Oi band?
Yes.
No, so that was Bayonet UK.
Bayonet UK.
It was all the same circle of friends, right? So there was a couple kids from Syracuse University that had this band where they really just loved Oi music and Billy Bragg.
Bayonet UK is one of my favorite things I've ever heard.
No, it's great. And they were nerds, like total nerds for like just sitting around and crafting songs. So they would make these songs, and there's tons of Bayonet UK recordings which are just really low key, like just 2 of them on a 4-track.
You used to play one that sounded like it was the live.
Yeah, so
it
I'm
was
getting
them
to that.
playing
Hold on.
live.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this actually, Benny's Boys Live, which is the
Betty's Boys live,
which is the live Bayonet UK recording, which isn't really live.
because they're not a real band.
Well, they will be in my heart forever. So what happened was, some of this stuff had been coming together enough where they actually wanted to play a show, and so they got a drummer.
Can you name some of the titles of some of their songs?
Bayonet Your Arsehole, Break Your Head. Oh crap, I can't remember.
They did
lot
a
of
Christmas record.
They did.
They
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. Margaret Thatcher's Nuts Over an Open Fire was one of the songs or something like that.
What
The 12
there were 2 people in the band.
12th wait,
The 12 Days of Christmas was wonderful.
No, but it was the 12 pints of Guinness.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Throw a punch at Tommy.
yeah, so
Okay,
so
hold on. There were 2 people in Bayonet UK. What
Yeah,
were their
but
names?
Mick Jagger, no relation.
Mick Jagger,
And
no relation.
And I can't remember the other
Okay.
one. But so they were actually going to play a real show.
Okay.
But they were obsessive about recording a lot of things. So when the show fell apart because the drummer got like invited to tour with a different band, like, and that was his thing, he wanted to tour with punk rock bands.
Right.
He left town, and they had these recordings, and they were shitty sounding enough where they couldn't use them. Like, they couldn't make a studio recording, but they were like, we could make a live recording of this. Now, mind you, they might be listening to this and think I get details wrong, but this is how I understand it. So they started just doing all this like shit where they like layered on their own voices as a crowd.
Right.
And then they added like banter between songs, and they put the songs in a loose set list. They played Birkinghamshireton, and they had a drunk rowdy crowd. They actually took bottles and would clink them together and add that throughout. They did this amazing work.
You were in the crowd, weren't you?
I was in the crowd for a little bit, and then I was about to move at the time, and they invited me over, and they called me up from the crowd to do one song with them, which was Break Your Head.
Nice.
So I had to stand across a room and then walk towards them as they just to get the recording track down. And then I repeated the one line of Break Your Head.
I discovered this by like when you were living here with me, I come to your room and you're playing it and you're like, oh, listen to this.
And it sounds like a fucking great live recording.
It really does. I wish
when
it was released.
the opening track on that, with the name escapes me right now, is just so boisterous, and you feel like, holy shit, must have been a wild show.
Like,
and
if this had been real, this would be people's
in
favorite band of their teenage years. This would have been something that people.
It's 2 dudes in a fucking apartment near Syracuse University, and a Mac. And that's
Bayonet UK is one of my favorite bands.
Is the song "We're Still Here"? I don't know, but man, it is so fucking good. I love it to death, and I'm glad you brought that up.
I hope I can find some to put up on the page on Nobody's Knows for this podcast episode. You'll have a page on there.
There's a Bandcamp for the Christmas record.
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah, and it's that was a later thing. They did it a few years ago, and it is so good.
It is.
And I listen to it every Christmas season.
I'll definitely put that up at least. There used to be a page where you could find more of the stuff.
And there might be the Time to Operate Records is the record label they were involved with, and there might be some stuff up there. But fucking A, Benny's Boys Live is so good.
You still have it, right?
I still have it.
I need a copy of it.
Yeah, I have to. I mean, now I want to listen to it again. But
Me too.
There's a couple like legit like other songs that they wrote that are just, if you strip away all the like, I mean, those songs are good, and they're even better in the live context. But there's a couple songs like they wrote that are just phenomenal on their own. And these guys are just great musicians who just were fucking around. And this is like, to have that talent and just be like, this is a thing I did. And they just, I mean, I'm in awe of that. And there's this one song, and just like anything else I try to do, I can't remember to right when I need to, but there's this great song about, it's a song about not wanting to be a commodity or something like that. Just the standard sort of punk thing. And it's fucking great beyond belief. By the way, we never even talked about some of the other standard punk things, like how much I love Crass and how much that informed my life.
So you found Crass at the same time as Straight Edge?
I found crass a little bit later, and then I found anarchism a little bit later because I was dealing with there was a big animal rights sort of thing going on. I went vegan in '95 and have been vegan since, and we were protesting fur stores, things like that, and that was huge. And at the time,
oh wait, you protested a Hooters.
I did.
You can be a little more proud of that now.
Yeah. That Hooters still got built. They didn't care that we
They
were
didn't
out there.
care that you were protesting.
I was super proud that when the newspaper asked me what my name was, I said Ray Capo.
Yeah.
And so, and someone eventually showed Ray Capo that picture, and he laughed. But no, at the time there was this huge thing in Syracuse where like there was a FBI investigation going on, and a grand jury was impaneled, and federal grand juries are like
no joke,
and they're horrible.
As we're finding out now about with the Trump administration, and we'll be finding out a lot more.
Yeah, but if you're like a person that, like, let's say opposes a pipeline, and legal action is taken against you for whatever reason, and there's a federal grand jury impaneled to investigate your shit because the government is eventually going to side with, most of the time, side with the moneyed interest in that situation.
Oh, sure.
A federal grand jury is a horrible thing. And we had this meeting once of the Animal Defense League that I went to where we had these guest speakers, and they were like local activists who were vegan, which blew my mind because I was like, I thought I knew all the vegans. And they were also, they lived in an anarchist sort of house, and I met them and I was like, man, what you're saying, there's so many cool things about what you're saying. Because a lot of kids at the time, their main sort of bent about being active was this animal rights thing. And that's fine. Like, animal liberation had its important spot in sort of my worldview at that time. But what I found interesting was that wasn't the only thing that was important. And a lot of these kids didn't think that. I don't want to paint them all with a broad brush. But some kids, they were there for that, right? And it was neat to see these people who were about other things. At the time, there was a huge annual protest that a lot of people from Syracuse went to around this thing called the School of the Americas, which was this place where military officers from Latin American countries would come train in the United States, and they would eventually go back to these repressive regimes and be, using the stuff they learned here to like just ruin the lives of and or kill, thousands of people. And I mean, I never got deep into that stuff, but there was a lot of other stuff that people were being active about that I started to see, and I eventually became good friends with one of those two people and was his roommate for a long time. And this is about the same time Set in Motion was happening, and Crass like came into my life at about that time, and I was like, things where life could be a political thing, because life should be a political thing. You should be about that, right? So I don't know. And I wasn't.
And all of this hit you like later in life, for when people kind of start to dive into this stuff.
You mean me relatively later in life than some people?
Well, I mean, because I feel like your world opened up in so many ways once you got out of high school.
It was like it all exploded all at once. There was so much to take in, and
it's straight edge and veganism and anarchy, and you're listening to Crass, and you're going to raves, and you really were just soaking it all up fast.
I was at the buffet and I was sampling a lot. But I found what really resonated with me, and I sort of formed this strict core of beliefs not strict core of beliefs, that sounds really rigid, but I had this sort of thing that
the discipline.
It's the key to self-liberation, is abstinence from the destructive escapism of intoxication. So see, I'm conditioned to know. But no, I found what I became kind of came out of that, right? By the way, do you have a To See You Broken record just sitting right there?
Yeah, of course I do.
Wow. There you go. That's a blast from the past. So,
that's the record release.
Yeah, I think
special dossier version.
Yeah, I think I have one somewhere.
Cool.
So yeah, and that was that. I that brings us to the present day of moving to Seattle 16 years ago.
Then you moved to Seattle. You left it all behind. You came out, and unfortunately, somehow you landed right in the orbit of Dave Larson, Bill Baker, and Adam Pacey.
Yeah, that whole group was awesome. And I lived in Tacoma with my mom for 6 months.
For 6 months, okay.
She offered me a place to stay. I didn't have to Craigslist roommates or anything like that.
Right.
And then I immediately, I knew one person here, Chrissy Good,
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a good person to know if you know one.
yeah, and that was her thing, was like she was like the person who introduced people to other people.
She became a force
Yeah,
to be reckoned with.
And so she was just like, you should meet these people. You should meet this person. I think she like formally introduced me to you, like in a more like formal fashion. But like, yeah, I met so many people through just being around that group, and then yeah, fell in with you and
a lot of stuff centered around the Paradox at the time still.
Yeah, and like it seemed like a really cool venue to me. I didn't know much about like kind of the weirdness about the people who ran it.
Yeah.
But the people they allowed to do shows there, like, I mean, they pretty much didn't look over.
Before it became Mars Hill, it was awesome.
Yeah. So it was about that time that like a lot of things started falling into place. I found I started dating someone out here like a few months after I moved here, and then through friends of hers, I found a place to live in Tacoma, and I lived there for about a year. And then you were like, dude.
Was it that long?
Yeah, well, I mean, I had a lease. So there was like, I lived 11 months.
Carrie Whitney was moving out.
Yeah.
She was my roommate with Jamond.
We were at some show somewhere.
And somehow it worked. You were going to move in.
I believe you asked me, and we were at a show at the, what was the place in Bellevue? That had
Ground Zero.
Ground Zero. I think that we were outside a Ground Zero show, and you were like, dude, I got a spot. And I was working in Puyallup, which for those people who don't know is like a fair distance from Seattle.
Yeah.
And I was living in Tacoma, which is pretty close to there. But then I moved up to Seattle.
You
and
can do it at a trot. You can do it at a gallop.
I don't know is that a reference to something innate?
Puyallup. That was the old Puyallup Fair. There used to be a Puyallup Fair theme song that they played on the TV all the time, and everybody knew it.
Yeah, people always associated that place with the fair, and they still do. The Washington State Fair, you know. And Syracuse, by the way, has the New York State Fair, which is
great.
huge.
Is there a song?
I'm sure there is. Like,
okay.
I don't remember it, which is weird because I have like vivid memories of.
Just so we're clear, you're letting me know that there's a fair in New York.
Yeah, it's a fair to remember. Wow. So
back in, go.
I think we have about 10 minutes of content. Like if you edit all of us.
You mean in the 2 hours we've been recording?
Yeah, I know. This is weird.
No, so this is good because we're caught up and you're here and then you move in with me. And so at this time I was living in a house that we were renting when you could still rent a house affordably to some degree in the Seattle area.
Yeah, I remember.
It was a great house. It was fun. A Ram was living there also on and off, if you could call it that. He wasn't on the lease, but he was there always. It
was awesome. Like, I mean, just those were great times. And it was crazy because, you know, I was worried that when I moved out here, I might not find a group of people, but I found my people here too. And, you know, it was a great place to live. It was a wonderful time. I remember soup capes, and I remember the snow. I remember the snowstorm.
I gotta find the soup cape picture.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Pizza Wolves.
Wolves. Yeah. And then.
So a soup cape is a blanket that you wear around the house.
Yeah, because it's warm like soup.
I don't remember why. Someone came in and said, "What's that? A soup cape?"
Well, Jamond.
Was it Jamond? Did he?
I think he named them. That's what I remember. So
Jamond was a.
You wear the blanket around a house instead of maybe putting a sweatshirt on.
Yeah.
And so you've got this blanket wrapped around
There's a picture of like 5 or 6 of us all with soup capes.
Soup capes, yeah.
Soup capes.
Yeah. So no, it was a weird time of life. And then that house kind of like, I remember now knowing what the landlord was asking for that house when he sold it out from under us. And that, like, I laugh out loud thinking like, man, that's something I could afford.
So he did actually sell that. Eventually that house got sold out from under us. It was such a great house. It was a huge basement. Yeah. And when I ended up moving out of the bedroom, I was never happy in the bedroom, like having a normal bedroom in that house. So I ended up building a fort in the basement and living in that. And it was wonderful.
Yeah, it was there was so many cool times had there. And then when I think I was there for a little over a year, and then the house got sold.
Yep.
And this is up by Roosevelt High School. This is like a very desirable neighborhood
65th
right
and 19th, basically.
Yeah.
And, man, it was so much good stuff happened there.
And then we couldn't, obviously, at the time, afford the house. I wish I'd kind of thought about it.
We were playing Worms Armageddon all the time, too.
Yeah, that was
Were you in on that?
Yes.
We would just refer to it as having a sesh.
Let's go have a sesh.
Let's have a sesh.
Yeah. And then Michael Ann was like, yo, I'm buying this house.
So Michael Ann who you have heard on some of the episodes of this podcast in the past.
Landlord.
Bob refers to her as a landlord for a reason. She bought the house that we're in currently. And she said, come live with me again to me. Because we had lived together prior to that. And
come live with me again to me.
And I said, should we bring Bob? She said, yes, we can bring Bob.
Like I was like the pet or something. It's like,
remember what it was, but you came along.
Bring your kid from your last marriage.
You came along, and then there were 3 of us living in this house here in Shoreline, and then a whole new series of things of reality just started being the case.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to talk about.
We had a room. It is still there. It is called the Bro Zone. Well, we called it the Bro Zone.
Yeah, so the old house had a sort of je ne sais quoi.
Yeah.
That we could be ourselves throughout the house. And we were we were more slovenly than Michael Ann.
Sure.
And
definitely.
So when we got this
and
place,
a lot of times there'd just be a lot of dudes hanging out there having dude conversations.
Well,
which we're not as bad as you might think.
No, it wasn't.
But we're not as good as you would hope.
It wasn't Donald Trump bus conversations.
No.
But
because at that point someone in the group would have been like, "You're kind of a dick, man."
Yeah,
like
no,
that shit didn't fly.
It was just not Michael Ann conversations. So to move into
the funny thing was Michael Ann could handle those conversations.
Yeah,
it wasn't other people's ladies' conversations for sure.
We moved into this house and we had that space and we just renamed that the Bro Zone.
Right. It was a space for you and I.
Which is, to me, a sort of weird name now that I think about it. But at the time, we were like...
Formerly known as the Bro Zone. But we had desks that faced away from each other. So we would sit at our desks and do various things on our days off. And I'd be facing one wall and you'd be facing the other.
We had a TV at the end of the room,
and we had a TV on the other end of the room. But when we were working on our computers, we would start bantering with each other. And we, at that point, created...
Dave and Bob in the morning.
Dave and Bob in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was our this is basically how it started. You gonna be able to do it?
I got to get in a zone here. Okay, I think I'm good.
You're the one who starts.
I lead off, right?
You do.
Okay, I'm putting my hand on the cans right now because I'm just like, okay, check. Okay, here we go. That was another hit from Ambrosia. We've got some Y&T up next, but you're listening to Dave and Bob in the morning. He's Dave.
And I'm Bob.
And we'll be right back.
No. See, okay, so that wasn't perfect.
But I went deep cut for that light rock.
You totally did. So originally we would just, and I don't remember all the stuff we used to say, but we used to just ad-lib as if we were radio morning hosts.
Man, it is killer on I-5 right now. If you can avoid that, please take the bypass. Cut through a neighborhood, damn it, because you're going to take all day to get to work.
Well, I'm sure those neighborhood homeowners really appreciate this advice, Bob.
Well, if Seattle had proper public transit, we wouldn't be here today.
Oh, there you go, you liberal. So
there was...
But the trick was this, though. You would say your line, which was,
he's Dave.
And I'm Bob. And we're Dave and Bob in the morning. And that's how we would go out, right? That was our ad for it.
Because Dave was so out of it, he couldn't remember who he was.
Well, that's the funny part. He's Dave and I'm Bob. Okay.
You're over-explaining the joke, Dave. Welcome to my life. You are living as me right now. No, I would also say that the other conceit of this was that we would, pretend to put in a next up is Journey. This is Separate Ways. And then,
it was continuous soft rock hits.
Yes, it was soft. Well, Ambrosia. Y&T is a little metal. Sorry, that's what I was feeling at the time. Summertime
Get
Girls.
ready for some Matthew Cross.
Was it Matthew Cross? It's Christopher Cross.
Who's Matthew? No, there's a Matthew Cross too.
Well, I don't know who that guy is. Christopher Cross.
Get ready for some Christopher Cross.
No, Christopher Cross is
his
sweet love making
classic
music.
Sailing.
Yes. Now, there's a story about Christopher Cross that's really interesting. He's not the most attractive person in the world, and when MTV hit, he was huge.
Yeah.
Then MTV hit, and a lot of artists had to go and be on MTV and be visible.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when his career fell apart because he's kind of like a portly man who just looked like a schlub.
I could have figured it out.
Yeah, well, he apparently didn't care.
So then we decided that we were actually morning show. So it was continuous soft rock hits, but we were DJs that did a show during it, so that was not continuous.
Well, I mean,
but
that's a tagline radio station shoots
totally.
all the time. So.
And then we decided that what it was that we were a popular radio duo.
We were.
Who hated each other.
Fucking couldn't stand each other.
So we would go when you put the record on, we would then just start viciously
attacking
needling each other, and then when the record was over, we'd pop right back into the banter.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not good at like making up.
No, at the time,
virulent banter.
Just imagine it. It was.
By the way, that's my new band name, Virulent Banter.
So that was our morning show.
I don't know if
I
those
really
are
wish
compatible words.
we had made a short film about it, because I totally wanted to go in and get like a radio.
Well,
booth.
there was like Mark and Brian, and they had their own TV show for a while. Where
Mark and Brian.
Yeah, they were like a huge deal. Like,
I used to listen to Mark and Brian.
Yeah, and there was Love Lab had like Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and
Love Line.
What I said, Love Lab, Love Lab, Love Lab is the singles part of the Stranger.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
That's how I met Jenna.
That's how you met your wife.
Yeah.
You have a child because of that.
Yeah.
All right, I'm into it.
But not because of Love Line.
Well, you probably got some good advice from the Ace man, from Ace Rockola at some point.
No,
I did not. No, you don't think he gave you some good?
No.
No?
So,
I mean, come on, he told you.
He said a lot of things. So, no, but I remember that Dave and Bob was one of just a many different things. Living with Dave Larson, by the way, is a wild ride, thematically, stylistically, just like different. Like, I mean, you were writing a horror movie one day, you're writing something else the next.
That's true, and you never know what I'm gonna hit you with.
Here's the thing. I'm sitting in a room right now with the writer of Snake Fighter, The Legend of St. Patrick.
You are, yeah.
And Z-Rex, the zombie T-Rex movie.
Both available on Amazon.
Yeah. And
for Kindle.
And so, but I mean, this guy also dealt cards. And
I was a poker dealer.
Ran a record label. Like,
yeah,
I mean, so there was a lot of things going on.
One day I just stuck a Ladysmith Black Mambazo ad on your desk.
Yeah, it was there. I still have it. Yeah.
It's because you love Ladysmith Black Mambazo.
I would say that I had never heard them before, and you were like, you had seen. Well, actually, I had, because they backed the Graceland album.
Yes,
but you had seen that ad, and you were like, this band that looks nothing like anything you listen to would probably be something weird to stick to your desk.
The reason was because we had watched Mean Girls. And when she says she's not going to go with her parents, her mom says, "You love Ladysmith Black Mambazo."
Okay, yeah.
And so that was just something I like to say. And I saw they were playing in Seattle, so you had to get the ad.
They're actually a remarkably good band.
Hell yes. I'm totally fine with that.
And that was at about the time, you had all the streaming music services happening, so I was able to go listen to them. So
totally.
Yeah. But
and then you were doing. See, you're saying it's crazy living with me. You're doing stuff like you're walking around the house taking photographs of yourself from different angles and then creating composite photos as if you live here with a group of other Bobs, like that Michael Keaton movie, Multiplicity.
Yeah, so I recommend that everybody in their life should spend a couple sessions with a therapist and talk about their shit, because it's super important. But
I don't think that's what this is, Bob.
No, I know. No. But I have done that,
okay.
But at the time I was fortunate to be around people who really gave a shit about me in a lot of different ways, but I wasn't doing as well as I think I wanted to be at the time, like 2005 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had some dating misadventures,
You did.
And I cared a lot, but not creepy a lot, but I still cared a lot. And when those didn't work, I was sad, and I didn't really internalize that so well, but whatever. At the time, I spent a lot of time by myself, and living here was great because I was forced to, like, if I had lived on my own, I don't think I would have been able to cope. But eventually you would come home, or Mike Land would come home, and then I'd get out and go to a show or something. But there was a lot of time I just was by myself, and you would force me to be social with others, which was great because I don't know that I would have. And I look back on that as like, oh, there's all these great social moments I had, but that's only because, like, I had people that sort of I don't want to say expected it out of me, but like that's just what we did. But if they hadn't been around, especially you hadn't been here, I don't think I would have reached out quite the same way that I did to people. And I worked at a place and I tried to be a little social there. And then I spent a bunch of time
You
by
worked
myself.
at Best Buy.
Yeah, I did.
Is that okay to say that?
Yeah, I like to refer to it as a retail place that I once worked.
A retail place where you once worked.
I worked at there for over a decade. But those pictures that you talk about is like I was at home and I was like just trying to kill time and I just took a bunch of pictures. I was like, wait, if this is how my brain works, I'm like, I've seen people do this thing in movies where like the actor's on both sides of the frame. I've got a digital camera now. I can do this. And this is just where my brain went. And so I sat on either side of a couch and then took 2 pictures.
Yeah.
And then split it in half and then just tried to line up the shit there. But the coup de grace was when I got 3 of me into one picture. One at the stove, one at the sink, and one walking by in the background.
Yes.
And I had no like Photoshop knowledge. I just was making vertical lines through the photo.
You're doing a great
and,
job.
And just at the right spot. But I look at that photo and we can post it or whatever. That was the product of a guy who was spending way too much time by himself.
Oh, so it's way more sad for you.
It is.
We were laughing about it at the time.
It is, and it is because throughout my entire life, up to that point, I had this on again, off again relationship with running, and it was the first social stuff that I was doing in high school, and it was I did it a little bit in college, and then I sort of fell out of it, came back into it, fell out of it, and I got into sort of being. I started lifting weights for a while, and right about the time that we moved in here, I was lifting weights still pretty regularly and running a little bit. But then at one point I was like up to about 220 or so pounds, which is...
Oh, you were doing a real like weightlifting regimen for a while. Regimen, like where it was amazing to see it because you're also seeing how much food you were taking in to do it.
Yes. And that's I came to this point where I was like, man, if I don't continue to lift weights and I continue to eat as much as I'm doing.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
Then that's just, I'm not going to lose any of this weight.
But you became a big dude.
I was about, I think, 220 pounds. And that was kind of a weird time in my life because I didn't notice that quite the same way everyone around me did. Because as I said, I was 6'2", 155 in high school, And then at about that time, when those pictures were taken, I was like, there was a lull in my mood. And I also stopped working out. And like none of my clothes fit right anymore. And in that picture, like I'm wearing the equivalent of sweatpants essentially, because it's the only thing I was comfortable in. And I was like really bummed about that. And then it was about that same time when I was working with someone who coached a track team. And we were talking about track one year. This was 2005, the first time he approached me about it. He ran track in high school. He was a couple years younger than me, and I'd run track in high school. And we were talking. He's like, I coach jumpers and sprinters, and I'm not really great with the distance stuff. You ran distance in high school. How about you come help me out? And I was like, oh, no, I couldn't possibly do that. Helping kids doesn't seem like it's in my wheelhouse. And I turned him down, but he came back to me the next year. And it was right then that I was like at this sort of emotional and sort of physical sort of like nadir, if you will.
Okay.
Low point.
I will. Normally, I don't even allow if you will, but I will in this case.
And I said, sure, I'll come. He approached me. He's like, I still need a distance coach. And I went to the school and I helped out. And I helped out for a track season. It was fucking great. And I started running again. And I felt a certain way about myself that I hadn't felt in a while. And then, so much shit started happening. And about the same time, the last band I was in started. That was early 2006. So right about the time when I'm trying to figure out this funk I'm in.
Oh wait, so that's the helm.
The helm starts, yeah. And so it had kind of come together. And again, this is a product of people forcing me to still kind of be around. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I kind of want to be in a band.
Talk about the helm.
Well, Tim Trust was in it. And I wanted to start a band with Tim, and he and I would occasionally, for years.
Who had been in Left with Nothing.
Yeah, for years.
And Own Heart?
Yeah, and he was in another one.
Birth Control. They became
Yeah, but no,
Is
but he
that
was
right?
in a
Do I have
band.
the right names?
Yeah, he was in another band that was like longer songs, kind of medley band. I can't remember their name right now.
Hold on, I'll have it in a second.
They were Tacoma kids, but
Did
Divinity of Truth.
Divinity of
Yeah,
Truth.
yeah. I also didn't really believe his last name was Trust for a long time. But then I was like, my last name is Swift, and a lot of people don't believe that sometimes.
Right,
So,
because you're a running coach,
yes.
and they're just like, fuck you.
yeah, and so what happened is Tim and I had been talking off and on for years about being a band, and then I ran into Ryan Murphy at shows and stuff, and this is a huge deal to me because Ryan Murphy is like the drummer from Undertow, and Undertow was a big deal to me, and like he's kind of a celebrity to me. He's just like your bro.
Yeah.
And he's moved back into town at about that point, and he might have been in town for a little bit too, but he started coming out and around more, and he was trying to start a band with Tim, and Ben Colton was involved somehow with some of these talks, and I realized, you know, and then probably some of them realized, why don't we just make this all into one band? And when he did his interview here, he said some really great stuff that I couldn't be more proud of, like that if he was still in a band, it would be that band.
Nice.
But he also talks about how like some portion of what the Helm once was practiced a little bit, and then it sort of really came together late 2005, early 2006, and then which was good because I remember having some days where I couldn't like remember like what I did that day. I was just like, this is like, what did I even do? You know, Michael Ann sometimes goes to France, so if she wasn't here and you were busy, like it's just like, oh crap, I just had a day that I don't remember. Like, and it was like, and
like if other people aren't seeing you, you don't exist.
Well, it's weird. It's the tree falling in the forest. It wasn't so much that, right? It's not like that. My ego was like, I don't exist because no one's acclaiming
So you mean,
me.
Bob, you can verify the sound because if you're there, it's the same as no one being there?
No, it was like the things were so fucking monotonous and unbearable at that point. So, but like, so we started this band, and about the same time, I started being a coach, and shit just started getting pretty crazy. And
your life turned around for the better, even though it wasn't that bad.
No,
It was
but
kind of in your head.
No, I know, but I mean, I think a lot about like kind of, you know, the friends that I have that have had depression and things like that. And I'm wondering like how much I was affected by like either like my own anxieties or depression or anything like that. But I don't want to claim that I had like medical depression, but like there was definitely some days where it was like, I mean, this is terrible. What is going on? But you know, yeah, shit just got pretty amazing. I mean, the Helm ended up being this fantastic band, and we got to tour a bunch, and Murph was in the band for a while, and then he moved, and then we got Jeffrey, and then he played drums.
You put out a number of releases.
We put out a demo, which then became a 7-inch. There's a comp song somewhere, and we have 2 full-length records. Yeah, I would say we were fortunate. I mean, and I was also, I've been really lucky to be in bands with people like that. I'm always like in awe of their musical ability. Even the crappy punk band that, by the way, it was crappy because of my abilities that I was in, was made up of great musicians who essentially were playing down to be in a band with me. Like, you know, but probably didn't realize it as much at the time, but I was not good. But maybe they didn't know what good was like in the same way.
Yeah, you don't need to denigrate yourself this much for this.
But in Gunman and Flight Paths, that just came together in such a great way. And then the Helm was like, yeah, it was awesome. I was like, I could not be more thrilled with how that turned out. And
cool. And then you got married.
And then made the mistake of making you my best man. And then there was a kid. And that's when I quit the Helm.
Thank you that was very nice of you making me your best man.
It was
one of the best men.
It was, well, I mean, you were the official best man.
Okay.
There was a wedding party of 2 other guys, right? Tim and Ryan. And man, there's just so many things that like I've talked poorly about, and so many things that I haven't talked about in this.
Well, so we have to get to the end, because we're going to be a long episode, and that's fine. It should be. But what things haven't we talked about that you want to talk about?
Man, I don't know. Like, I mean, I'd still be in the helm if I could, like, but I didn't want to short the band. They were still writing really good stuff, and I was like,
Did they go on without you for very long?
they still kind of exist. They haven't broken up.
So you could just saunter back in sometime.
No. I would never.
They have another singer?
I would never presume to do that. No, they're a 3-piece now.
You would never presume to do that.
It's not my band. It hasn't been my band for nearly 5 years.
Okay.
My daughter was born. I'm coaching.
There aren't hard and fast rules about this stuff. You could probably sing for the helm if they wanted you to.
Oh, if they asked me to, I could occasionally do that. But
I wouldn't say you just tell them they have to.
no, that's what I took it to mean. I was like, you could just walk into their practice and grab a mic and fuck you guys, I'm back.
It's like it never stopped.
I don't know that they actually practice that much. They play occasional shows a couple times a year.
Cool.
But
they're just waiting for you.
it was weird to see
I
them
don't know
without.
if that's true, but
It was weird to see them without me
Yeah.
because I was like, oh, that.
It's like taking 2 steps forward and turning around.
Are you making fun of me somehow?
Kind of in a way. If you're the
Okay.
singer, you just step into the crowd and turn around, and that's what it'd be like seeing the
Yeah,
band
but-
without you.
No, but it's not like taking 2 steps forward and turning around. It's like being separated from something that like really meant a lot to you for a long time, and then
God, I wasn't trying to make
Man.
it like a something so like emotionally devastating.
well, I've always been known as a good man and thorough, and I'm trying to be thorough about this.
A good man and thorough.
He's a good man and thorough. Sorry, I just that's what comes to mind right
That's
now.
what you used to say to your new drummer,
Yeah, no. So
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey, yeah, yeah. Well, he's not the new drummer. He's been in the band forever.
He was the new drummer at the time.
Yeah. I'm lost.
Well,
So-
she says he's a good man and thorough to Jeffrey.
Oh, okay. I get that now. The dude is. I always know him as the dude.
But Maud calls him Jeffrey.
That's fair. She calls him Jeffrey. Jeffrey.
Right.
Yes.
And so then I went, oh shit, that was the fuck.
Yeah. No, I get it now. It's just
It's a heavy. No, we're explaining the joke again.
yeah. Welcome to my life.
It wouldn't really be.
If you've gotten
Thoughts
this
for
far
podcast.
in the episode, you know that I digress a lot, but Dave digresses a lot. But
Yeah,
one of the
it's a
things
podcast,
that
what
makes
the
this podcast is that Dave can digress in interesting ways. I've not done as much of that. So,
Come on.
furthermore, let's talk about things we didn't get to.
Oh yeah. What should be?
When I became a dad, I said to the band, I had a lot going on.
Yep.
Sorry, I tapped this mic cord here. I don't want to hold you guys back. They already right before my daughter was born, they went on a tour without me, so they were prepared.
Yeah.
And so I left the band, and I had a job that like was much better than my retail job, and I had a new daughter, and coaching informs my being in a way that's just like so like intense and wonderful that I couldn't compromise on that either. So I left that, and I miss it a bit, but yeah, I mean that was the time. I mean, 2 U.S. tours. I mean, some wild shit happened. Not in the sense that like it was like wild rock band stuff, but like, I mean, we were far away from Seattle, and our bass player quit, very, very different things like that. And it was a life that I'm glad I got to do. And I wish, there's the old adage that when you're on tour, you want to be home, but when you're not on tour, you want to be on tour. And sometimes I wish I could be in a van driving around the country, but then, I mean, have you met my kid? She's fucking amazing.
She's awesome.
And, I just kind of want to be around my family, and I want to be around my school family of all these kids that I'm coaching. I couldn't compromise quite the same way that I used to be able to when I was, had none of that. Right.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about a couple things. There's a lot we didn't talk about that would not be appropriate for podcasting. Number one.
Sure.
Because I am the funniest person in the world, and
Sometimes when you were living here,
yeah,
we were the funniest people.
yeah. But no, I think that I got to say that there's just too much to think about. I would say that I don't know. Like, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of stuff we didn't talk about, but like unlike a Greg or a John or something, like I don't know if I'm worth an episode 2, but I would say.
This is you're making a play for an episode 2.
No, I'm not
a Bob Swift check-in episode.
No, I'm not. Those guys are known by people as people who do things. Like you could check in with me about Metro League cross country statistics, and I can be like, yeah, this year it looks like good for a girls team. two straight state meets. You know, like, I mean, and that stuff I could talk a lot about.
I
But
feel like I would want you here for another type of podcast.
I would gladly come podcast with you again. But it's
We'll
weird.
do that improv podcast.
It's weird to be in what was once my bedroom. It seems much smaller than it was at the time.
Well, that's because I've piled tons and tons of crap in here.
Yeah. And I got to say the time that I spent in this house was, you know, like extensive. It's the place I think that I've lived more than any one other place in my life. Up until recently when, like, with this lease that I just signed at my current place, we'll be there for a long enough time where it'll be more. But, I mean, just what a time. What a time. I mean, it's so many great stories. But, I mean, we just kind of went on a different journey. I mean, we didn't talk about how a Ram took me on tour with Champion at the time, and that's how the Helm got out there, is because he said, bring some demos.
Yeah.
You know? And then...
and we went to Vegas for his wedding.
Yeah, 2 weddings in Vegas I've been to. I've been to remarriages for both those people now. So, and then, I mean, there's just a lot of different stuff. But I mean, yeah, I'm honored that you would have me here. But I don't know. I mean, is there something you feel that we missed that we should talk about?
Oh no, I think you've talked too much.
I feel self-conscious about that all the time. So thank you.
Okay. Here's the thing. I mean, I knew you'd understand it was a joke, but I thought I didn't quite expect the real hurt to like come through there a little bit.
Cuts like a knife.
Bob.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, man, there's just some good stuff. I mean,
I put you off for a while because I said I wanted to do podcasts that covered earlier years. I think you're one of the first podcasts that really covers a more 90s centric. No, there have been a couple, but I knew those people further back into the 90s than I knew you.
Yeah.
But
it was weird. It was the thing I'm most proud of ever having done in my life is actually getting off my ass and moving.
Out here?
It's not a thing that if you knew me, you would know that I would take a risk on.
Well, Bob, those of us who have you in our lives now because you did that are better off for it.
And I appreciate that, because I mean it's a varied and wonderful cast of rogues. And
you fell into some real freaks, dude. Come on.
Yeah. So, but I mean, there's a lot of different things, but I don't know, the conversation didn't go that way. So whatever, man.
It goes the way it goes.
Yeah.
You're at the helm.
You know, I didn't come up with that band name.
It seemed like everyone at the time thought it was a Star Trek.
Yeah, that was Tim came up with the band's name, and he says he comes to practice. He's like, "What if we call this the Helm?" And at the time, I had this very hardcore sounding name in mind. And he comes to practice and he says, "What if we call it the Helm?" And I'm like immediately like, "Why would you do that?" He's like, "It's where you steer the boat." And it was so simple, and so like the concept could go so many ways with that. It's just like, yeah, I mean, that's awesome.
The thing I don't believe about the story you're telling me right now is when he said, "Why don't we call it the Helm?" that your brain didn't immediately just go Star Trek crazy.
No, I did. I said, "Yo, dude, you realize who's in your band? The moment we call it that, people are going to ask why we don't have like themed shirts or something."
Bob, true or false, you have Star Trek officer insignia tattoo on your neck.
I have my boy JLP's rank tattooed on my neck.
What is? Oh, really?
Jean-Luc Picard.
Jean-Luc Picard's rank. Is that what it is? Yeah. Is that the only Star Trek tattoo you have?
2 others.
You have 3.
I have 3. I have the SETI eel, the ear creature from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
Generally accepted by me to be the best movie ever made. And then I also have a tattoo for my first band, which is just the font is Starfleet bold extended. It's the font they put on starships. So,
and it's the ship designation, right?
Yeah, it looks. Yeah, it's the same numbers. It's just the numbers for S, I, and M for my first band, and they're around my wrist. But the font is Starfleet bold extended, which is what you would number a starship.
Do you have a severed hand clutching a bloody envelope?
I do. But that was a Ram tried to get someone to get that tattoo for years. And here's the deal. Like, after a while that became kind of like this. I was like, I need a little spot filled here. Then it became more than a little spot.
Right.
And but it just was, I at the time was getting tattooed by an artist who was also into weird shit. So like when I went to that guy who still tattoos, he's up on Capitol Hill, and I can't remember the name of the place he tattoos, Eric I. But he's into weird stuff. Like I was like, "Here, can you tattoo this phone on me? It needs
Bob,
to be."
I think he did my tattoo.
Which one?
I've got just one family and 3 X's around my ankle.
Yeah, that must have been way before.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was maybe at Mind's Eye Tattoo.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. That's why he's Eric I.
Yeah.
But he left there way before that place closed. And either way, he like I was like, "Can you tattoo this phone on me?" He's like, "Sure." And then he draws up this phone, and it's a rotary dial phone, and it's got, tusks and horns. And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "I was just going with it." And it's like, "Okay, cool." And so there's different things that are weird about him, but the surreal idea of this like severed hand holding a bloody envelope, you're like, what's in the envelope?
Nah.
Why is it covered in blood? And so it was just an interesting idea. And then I was like, oh, and I have the perfect artist for it. And he's the guy who's been tattooing me for a while now.
Tattooing you?
Yes. Is that when you babies on Tatooine from their mothers?
What?
Weaning is when you stop nursing and you start eating solid foods,
God.
right?
Yeah. Okay. I feel better about every joke I've made that hasn't landed.
Yeah.
Like not. I don't mean in this session.
Can you just add? I mean, I know we talked about adding music and how it's copyrighted, but sad trombone can't be.
I think we can just make a. Don't laugh during it.
This is going to be what, episode 31, right?
Stop laughing during the sound effect, Bob.
You should just name this.
Now I can't do it.
So you should just name.
I don't know what number it's going to be because there's actually others in the can that haven't been released yet.
Okay.
It's going to be a little while before this comes out.
I like
Bob.
this. There's a physical can where these live. You should just have a can where these just memory cards are in it. Or
I should save everything to some sort of a external media and put it in a can so that I'm literal.
Yes. So you should. The title of this episode shouldn't be my name. It should just be Sad Trombone. We'll take you on a painful journey, folks.
I don't. Your impression is always. I always think it's funny. Like the funny thing is, I lived through all those things that you talked about when you were living here in the house, and you describe it. I think you remember pain.
Maybe, yeah.
But you had a lot of good times.
Oh no, I had a lot of. I'm not trying to paint my.
There was a lot of laughter and joy in that time that you're talking about was so sad and.
There was a part where like it was because that stuff was like, because, and I said that earlier. I was in a spot where my friends didn't force me, but it was like I was around people who supported me. If I had been living on my own, I don't know where I would be. Right, like. I'm not saying I would like have taken my life or whatever, but I just had so much support and like, genuine like feelings of awesomeness from you guys that I couldn't get too bad, So that's why I would never claim to be like medically like depressed or something, probably because the people in those situations, that's much tougher for them. So.
All right, I get you. Let me try this one more time, okay? You still laughed.
It's the headphones. It's because I can hear just how sad that sad trombone is.
I was just trying to get to drag out a little bit at the end, Yeah. All right. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming out here today and doing this.
It's been no problem, Dave. I'd like you guys to know that you can see me next week at the Emerald Queen Casino. I'll be playing with Keith Sweat, and it'll be a good time.
And I'll be at the Tulalip Indian Casino, nowhere near Bob.
That went somewhere.
Well, I assume that we haven't been on the same show for a long time.
Oh,
now.
You mean Dave and Bob? I was just, I wasn't in the character of Bob from Dave and Bob.
You were a different character that had to do with...
You do talk shows when they're like, what are you doing now? What are you up to these days?
Oh, yeah. You got anything to plug, Bob?
Well, I got a thing to plug. I'm on Twitter these days as Admiral Poopy Pants. And
you can catch my tweets on this website, Twitter. Have you seen this? The Twitter app? Is it an app or a website? What is it?
Yes. And then you can also find me...
Facebook? Are you on Facebook?
No.
Is MySpace still a thing?
Friendster. You can find me on Friendster.
Oh, Makeout Club.
Makeout Club. Sexy Scenesters.
Wait, Wang Out Club.
Oof.
Wait, Wait a minute, you can find me posting under the name Doug's Roommate on the B9 board.
Wait, hold on.
We've got a minute.
Yeah, no, let me just say, that's one thing we never went into. The fact that for years you posted on a message board as Doug.
What do you mean for years? I post on the Bridge 9 now as hold on.
Okay, well,
I post on the Bridge 9 now as Doug.
Okay, so you still do, but for years I was on the Bridge 9 board, and the only name I chose was Doug's Roommate, and no one except for you and me understood what that was all about because no one cared. And
no one cared at all.
That was
not like we were frequent posters or really in any of the real.
No, but that was our joke because there were so many things that we talked about in 7 years that no one would have given a shit about. And well, I hope that this podcast was more interesting than that, but I honestly could come here and just chat with you for 2 hours, microphones or no, and you could release it. But the level of things that I find amazingly hilarious when they involve you is sometimes just Doug and Doug's Roommate, right? So yeah.
Well, there is a character named Doug Lawless.
No, I
who
understand.
Does things like eats crazy bread on YouTube and stuff.
Yeah, but I'm still the guy who is Doug's roommate. So,
yeah,
which
is nice. You're involved.
And Doug's Lawless isn't big enough for anyone to give a rat's ass about who his roommate is, right? So
we both had to be a little bit anonymous on the B9. I think it's probably still good for anyone involved in that cesspool to
yeah,
to
I mean,
be
I
anonymous.
think I posted about like shows occasionally. I read all the controversial threads, but I really didn't have a place in that board that wasn't just like more like, hey, have you heard this band or whatever, so. But man, thank you.
Thank you. We just did
being a friend.
We did the handshake with the snap just a second ago. But then you were going into a character, so I just kept it going.
Okay.
Bob, you're awesome. Dave,
you're okay.
Well, thank you. We're gonna leave your bedroom now. I wonder if that belt is still around here anywhere. Is that like sign language for cut it? Something you don't want to talk about?
You can go to hell.
All right. Thank you for sticking it out for that one, that long one. I always love doing these episodes when it's somebody that I could spend just a long amount of time with. And when we're done, it feels like, well, we just got started, Living with Bob for as long as I did. The conversation that you heard today, a lot of that was what our day-to-day life here at the house was like. So, yeah, that was great. It was wonderful to have him. Of course, we didn't get everything right. I mean, imagine that. So, got to do some corrections, of course. Just little things, but I'll tell you, at one point we were talking about the song Steppin' Out, and we say by Joe, and then I think we don't say the last name. Of course, that's by Joe Jackson. We were talking about the Berlin airlift as if we knew anything about it. That the Berlin airlift lasted for more than a year, from June of 1948 to September of 1949, contrary to our completely uneducated guesses. So, when I'm editing these episodes, I go back and check on stuff like that. At one point, when we're doing our fake radio voices, I say Matthew Cross when I should have said Christopher Cross. I say that Matthew Cross is somebody, though, and I was right. Matthew Cross played drums for Orange 9mm, and maybe that's why that name just was floating around in my head. And near the end of the episode, I say that I post on the Bridge 9 board now as Doug. Or actually, the way I said it was, I post on the Bridge board now as Doug, because at the time, I was still posting on the Bridge 9 board. And it was true, when we recorded the episode. But sadly, and probably for the good of all mankind, the Bridge 9 board was shut down. If you go to b9.com or whatever it is, b9board.com, you just get what looks like television color bars and it says technical difficulties or something like that. I always hold out hope that means they'll come back, but it's been many months now. I don't think they are. So, the board is dead. Long live Jeep Bra.
This podcast is a product of the Nobody's Knows Podcast Network. Executive producers, David R. Larson and K. Drake Streetman. Music for this episode provided by Polymorph from the album Artifacts, Demos and Debris.
Dylon, Dylon, Dylon,
Oh, is it
Dylon,
that-
and Dylon. Because I spit hot fire.
Oh, because I'm confusing that with the turn my headphones up. Turn my headphones up.